Okay, so we're going to call to order the meeting of the Planning Commission for Thursday, September 15th. So I get a roll call, please.
Yeah, Commissioner Newton,
Here.
Commissioner Green, Commissioner Hamilton, Chair Caroline,
Here.
Commissioner Fergoso, Commissioner Ackerman, Commissioner Gonzalez, not here. Barbara Gonzalez.
Okay, so the next item is approval of the agenda, and Jim, you had some comments on that?
Yes. We recommend that you go forward with the public comments on non-agenda items and the discussion item, which our town manager is here tonight to give you the report and lead the discussion on. And you also, I'm not sure, it doesn't look at this point that there's many members of the public here to discuss this very controversial issue. And then with regards to item 2, we would request that you put that last after items 3 and 4, because while Michelle Levinson, our zoning technician to my left, she's project planner on it, she has been working in concert with Linda, our principal planner, who is actually at first night at school with her son and will be getting here late. We'll start that if she's not here by then, and we actually are going to be recommending continuing item 2, 145 Forest Avenue, after you've at least heard a brief staff report and some comments by myself, from the applicant himself, and also members of the public, who I believe there is at least one person here to speak to that. And then we're recommending, and we'll explain why, that you continue it after that. And then lastly, with regard to item 3, the applicant of 19 Broadway did not get the information to us in time. So they're not here tonight, and we're recommending continuing item 3 to the October Planning Commission hearing. And it will have to be heard because the Permit Streamlining Act is up after that. So they, with or without their information, it'll be on your docket for October. And then lastly, after you get through those 3 items, and the discussion on Airbnb being the first one, you have the minutes and my report and your comments and requests that we can wrap up on. So that'd be our recommended alterations to the agenda, if that made sense. Move through 2 to the end, continue 3, and we'll start on 4 with or without Linda, but we eventually recommend continuing that.
I so move.
I'll second those modifications to the agenda.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, so we'll adjust the agenda. We just, as approved. And so I guess now we'll start with the, are there any public comments on non-agenda items?
Hi, Mark Bell, 63 Dominga. I have a couple of things to update you on regarding Perry's and their use permit. I know it's not on the agenda and that it'll be coming up soon. To date, since June, when you approved the permit, there have been over 32 violations of their use permit. Every group that has performed there except one, to my knowledge, has been amplified, not just vocally, but also guitars, bass, upright bass, even percussion at times. So that's over 32 violations, not counting when they ran over by 40 minutes, not counting when they ran over by 20 minutes, and not counting when the volume was also breaking the law. Further on this, this has all been done willfully on the part of Perry's. They've made no attempt to talk to the bands, to have them perform acoustically, because if they had, they would be performing acoustically with only the vocals being amplified. This has been July, August, into September. If you look at September's schedule, everything in the afternoon, every band there, from what I can tell, will be amplified and have been amplified since you gave them the permit in June. It's just been business as usual. And as far for the night, from the town council meeting when we brought up these points, we asked that staff, when they had a chance, look into a couple of issues. One is, for the nighttime, is the back door, part of their use permit is for that back door to be closed. And also, even for the afternoon, do the back doors of both the side patio and the back need to be closed? Because what that does is, if the doors are closed, the sound doesn't go down Dominga. And believe me, people on Dominga are not running to Perry's to go listen to whatever they have going on there. I requested at the town council meeting that Perry's be cited, because I think the only thing that they will understand is if it costs them money for breaking the law. So they said that since the planning commission are the ones who give the use permit, it's at your instruction if they can be cited or not by the police. So hopefully that will come into play. To me, the sooner the better. I know that you probably cannot deal with that tonight since it's not really an emergency. And I guess lastly, kind of amusingly, my wife and I have been 86ed from Perry's. We can no longer go in there. I can't play with any of, like the other band I play in. Just had a gig at Perry's on the 3rd, even though I couldn't make that one. I wouldn't have been able to play anyway. And I think we may be the only people in history to be 86 from a bar from trying to prevent them from breaking the law. So thank you very much.
So, Madam Chair, you're not supposed to discuss things that are brought up, but just as a matter of the record, we are aware of Mr. Bell's email asking for clarification on certain things, and I have asked staff to look into what's been defined to date. And you will be having this back on your docket in October. If you recall, you decided to speed up the review of their use permit, and you moved it up on the agenda from January to October. So stay tuned. You will be able to review what's going on. We'll have a complete report for you on the police records, on any emails that have come in, and you'll be having a chance to thoroughly revisit the use permit. And we do cop to the fact that, when we went through this the first time, there was a lot of ifs, ands, and buts on the number of musicians, the type of amplification, these things that we're more versed now in deciphering through what it means. So we hopefully will have a very thorough staff report for you to digest. Yes.
Through the chair, I'm sure it will be very thorough, and I wonder if it could include what the policy is on citations in regards like this.
Yes,
Thank
and
you.
it did come up at the council meeting, and the town manager, correct me if I'm wrong, Garrett, did articulate the fact that for compliance with use permits, that's a code enforcement issue, which is my department, and is administered through the building official and administrative citations, as opposed to the police dealing with the noise ordinance, which isn't even a part of section 17 of the town code. It's in the health and safety. So if it's not violating anything at the property lines in terms of the decibel limit within the health and safety noise element, a noise portion of health and safety code, it falls on our department for code enforcement. And that's what we will be reviewing with you in October.
Yes.
A question for the planning director. I thought that at the last meeting, it was clarified that the use permit was only for the vocal amplification. Am I incorrect?
Yeah, no, I'm not fully up to respond to you right now on that, but we will be reviewing what we think you did approve and articulating it, and going through and then looking at the supposed violations and coming back to you with what our thorough assessment is. I didn't plan on getting into this tonight, so I don't have the benefit of total recall in going back in the history of this right now.
And just want to add one other thing, that I can confirm what Mark said about the instruments being amplified. It's not just the vocalists at the moment.
Right. So the good news is we'll be revisiting this 3 months ahead of schedule next month.
Okay, thank you for that update. Are there any more public comments? Okay, so please come forward.
My name's Kathleen Merrifield, and I live at 56 Dominga, and I just want to say I concur with what Larry Bell has said. I don't have the detailed information that he has. I just know that it's very noisy between 11 at night and 1 in the morning, which for me is certainly disruptive, and that's all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Peggy Lagomarsino. I live on Bridge Court, and I am just here in support of my neighbors, Mark and Ling Chin. I hope that the Planning Commission understands it's not just, yeah, they're the ones that are carrying the banner, but there are more people than just them who are bothered by the noise from Perry's. And particularly for me, it's on weekends when I'm home. I work and I commute, and when I'm home, I really need the quiet enjoyment of my own home, and I think I have a right to the quiet enjoyment of my home, and I don't see why the rights of Perry's supersede those of the people who live near them. If they have a use permit, they should be abiding by their use permit, and I'm hoping that the Planning Commission or whoever's responsible will enforce that use permit if they are in fact thumbing their nose at it. That's it. I just wanted to throw that in there.
Thank you.
Ling Bell. So there was a couple things. I mean, I don't know if it's going to work, but I just had this idea that in case you were able to find Perry's, and a very good use of the money would be to improve the acoustics in this room. This room is very bad acoustically. It seems to me we always have to strain to hear each other, and in order to have democracy work better, I think it would be a good plan. So I even know who you could ask, because there's, but anyway, that would be great. And the other thing is that unfortunately we're not going to be here next month, Mark and I. So I was wondering if it would be possible to postpone till November, because we would love to be able to be there for this issue. So if that was possible, that would be great. And that's all I had to say. Yeah.
So, Jim, would you like to respond to that?
Let me confer with the town manager offline and let you guys know, but I think we understand the Bell's position pretty well, and they'll have a chance to put any concerns in writing before the meeting, and I will confer with my supervisor and perhaps the Bells beforehand, see if we can somehow keep moving forward, because time is of the essence as we get near the holiday season particularly. Thank you.
Okay, so any more public comments before we move on to the discussion item? Okay. Go ahead.
Oh, sure. Good evening, members of the commission. This item actually was before you back in April, but due to the lateness of the hour, we never got around to it. So maybe some quick background. Back in May 2015, actually a resident brought up this issue at the council meeting regarding trying to get a business license for a short-term rental. We actually put it on think agenda for council discussion in July, and we reported at that time, town code really doesn't provide for short-term rentals unless you had a use permit. And what the council indicated that they would like to have a study session on the topic. We'd had lots of difficulty scheduling a study session, so we just agendized it for discussion at the November council meeting. And at that time, after much discussion, the council referred the matter to the Planning Commission for some policy direction. And so what we have before you tonight is basically a series of, call them questions or policies that we'd like some direction from the Planning Commission on. And what we actually did in background, at the time in April, we prepared a table that kind of indicated how we compared to the other communities within Marin. And really you could see, I think 4 of us allowed with the permit, 2 prohibited outright, and the others, it's really not regulated. And so what we did was we actually used our online forum, Peak Democracy, back between January and April 2016 and surveyed the community on a series of questions. And so what I thought I'd like to do is kind of walk you briefly what the questions were, give you a little background on what the results of the survey are. I do have some information from Airbnb as one of the short-term rental companies. I didn't, their person for California was actually not available, so I only have answers to some of my questions. So I really, in some cases, we could talk about some things generally. So what I'd like to do is kind of walk, if it's okay, walk the commission through some of these issues. So first one was we asked, are short-term rentals a problem? Should short-term rentals of residential units be allowed? Our cursory research showed that maybe 30 or 40 units we think are in Fairfax. Airbnb, one of the things they came up with is they thought there were maybe 91 active listings, but the problem is I kind of asked them for the geographic location and she wasn't able to get back to me. So it's a little unclear how many units we're actually talking about. In terms of the benefits of short-term rentals, I think for some people that do it, obviously it's a form of income, and it can subsidize it can augment their income, allow them to stay in a home. I think in some cases it allows visitors and tourists to stay in town. They probably patronize some of our local businesses, so there's some benefits there. On the backside, I guess the drawbacks would be that obviously there's concerns from people related to impacts on traffic, parking, noise in the neighborhoods. I think since January, we've maybe received 3 complaints regarding maybe 2 homes related to parking or noise in town. So hard to tell if it really is a problem. See, in terms of the income numbers, what I do have from Airbnb, they indicated that a typical host in Fairfax area generates about $5,300 a year on the average in revenue. And the average night stay, I think they thought, average stay is about 3.7 days, and the typical host maybe rents it out for 47 nights during the year. And that's just kind of broad numbers. I don't know exactly where in Fairfax or how many units, but those are just kind of the rough numbers they tossed out to me. In terms of the survey, online survey, we had 76 responses. Interesting in that, only 8 residents out of the 76 actually reported that they rented out their home for short-term rental. 55% of the respondents said they would support renting out rooms for short-term rentals. Lower percentage, about 45%, said they would support the whole house. I think most of the respondents were unaware that it wasn't allowed within the town. The next question was, if allowed, what should be the process to approve short-term rentals? Actually, this is more of a question for the Planning Commission. Since we don't allow it except by use permit, the question is, should we allow it by right? We would require a business license, or should we have some kind of process in between where maybe you have an administrative use permit? It requires a little more review, but not the same thing as a use permit and not as easy as a business license. And that's really a policy issue for the Planning Commission to weigh in on. One of the questions on the online survey we asked is, should only rooms with the owners living on the premises or the entire house be allowed to be rented out? 55% of respondents indicated they would support renting out rooms. It was kind of split in terms of renting out the whole house. So, I think 34 yes votes, 37 no votes. The concern for people about renting out a whole house was the party house syndrome, public safety being a concern. In terms of I think one of the benefits, I think some comments from people were that obviously being able to rent out your house provides some income, and perhaps that offsets housing costs and allows people to actually remain in their homes. We did ask a question regarding second unit. Should it be allowed to be short-term rentals? I was a little surprised by this. Approximately 55% of respondents said they were fine with renting out your second unit as a short-term rental. 34% said no. It's really a policy issue if you think second units should be more of a form of what we consider affordable housing, more of a long-term use as opposed to short-term use. On the flip side, if you did allow short-term rentals, second units, maybe that would encourage owners to legalize them, and it probably would allow the town to actually figure out which of these units are actually not legal. We did ask another question about maximum or minimum number of days. Let's see, did we ask? Actually, I don't know if that wasn't, we did not ask that question online form related minimum or maximum number of days. Some communities impose that, but as I just reported, it sounds like the average stay for a typical host is 3.7 days, and then on the year it was about 47 days per unit. I don't know if that's really an issue or not. In terms of TOT is what we refer to as a hotel tax that we collect on the units. If we did allow short-term rentals, or even if we didn't, we really should try to collect the transit occupancy tax. But without a system in place, it'd be almost impossible to try to track that because we wouldn't know who actually has it. If we did allow short-term rentals, Airbnb does have a program where they would actually collect it on the town's behalf. In terms of the survey, I think most of the people, about 50% of the people supported a business license requirement. Only 9 opposed it, and over 50% supported collecting TOT on rentals. About 12 respondents out of the 63, so a little over about 20% or so said they didn't support it. But I think that's pretty much all the general type of policy issues we're looking on for direction on. And what I was hoping is, based on the Planning Commission's direction, what I would do is report back to the council on what you're recommending and see what the council, kind of how they feel. And then ultimately, it would come back to the Planning Commission with a series of all the required ordinance changes required to do whatever we're going to do if we're going to allow some form of it to be allowed without a use permit. So that concludes the staff report.
Okay, thank you, Garrett. Does anyone have any questions to ask before we open the public hearing? Or are we going to have a public hearing on discussion? It's discussion, okay. All right.
Yeah, I have a question, Garrett. Do you know whether if the town were to, for example, work with Airbnb to collect the transit occupancy tax, would Airbnb also be able to give the town a continual information on which units are being used? Because you mentioned that this is a way to find out where there are second units being used for, and especially when you have an illegal second unit being used essentially like a hotel, it really ought to be legalized and brought up to code. So would that information be available?
I'm assuming it would be, but I really haven't had that level of discussion with Airbnb in terms of the reporting.
Any other questions?
Yeah. Garrett, I don't know where this contract came from. Is this something that Phil Green provided, this attachment to the supplemental information that we have here? It's got Phil Green's.
I believe it sent in an email by Linda yesterday, I think, that
Right.
attachment.
Right. Since
with
Phil
Phil's
couldn't make it,
comments.
he offered up his comments.
I understand that. And there's an attachment to it, Garrett, which is a contract. And it looks like it's a contract between Airbnb and the hosts that it works with. So have you had a chance to look at that?
No, this is actually a contract that they have with the person who's providing the unit, not with the town.
Yeah, I
Okay.
understand that. It's a contract that Airbnb makes with
Right.
the provider of the room or the lodging. And I wanted to ask you a couple questions, but maybe when you have time to look at it, think about the liability issues and who's responsible for liability, because if we decide to go forward with permit, having it be either administrative or conditional use permit or whatever, I want to make sure that the correct insurance is in place to cover liability claims that might arise during a visitor stay. So it's just something to think about. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Any other commissioner questions?
Yeah, I had a brief question. What is the cost of a use permit and a business license? Would those be the only two requirements? And with a use permit, would it require full plans on the house, or what are we looking at right now?
A business license, we would have to establish that rate, but my guess is it'd be $100 plus or minus. And your use permit's what? I guess $813 for a use permit.
And that requires a plan submittal, right? Would that require a plan submittal? Is that the additional cost?
I think we would need to figure that out, because if it's a legal unit, which we could actually easily figure out, then if they're renting it out in their room, then really it would just be a matter of whether or not
Okay.
they would probably have to answer if they had parking or what the traffic would be or something along those lines.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions?
Actually, I guess I just want to clarify. So if there is an illegal unit, it wouldn't be allowed as a temporary, correct? Until it was legalized?
That'd be correct.
Okay. So if something gets posted on Airbnb and it's not legal, then that provides a vehicle for the town to know about it and then enforce? No. She says no.
Well, if you're saying if we found out it was illegal, then we would have to take action to let
Okay.
the property owner to make it legal.
Okay. And a conditional use permit, sorry, go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, I just thought one of the problems you said was we can't really identify an address. So I don't think it being listed on Airbnb is going to tell you, here's an illegal second unit.
Right. It would kind of require some kind of monitoring that is not necessarily formal.
What would happen is if it was allowed, then, and we had a relationship or a contract with Airbnb, and part of what they did was they provided TOT tax, and if part of that report, they actually listed the addresses, then that's how we would know.
It would give you an opportunity to determine whether it was legal or
Sure,
not.
unless they were just renting a room out of the house, then that
All
really
right.
doesn't matter.
And a TOT tax is a thank you.
Okay. And second question, so if the Airbnb required a conditional use permit, it would come before the Planning Commission for approval, correct?
That would be correct, but I
Okay.
think from a staff perspective, if we were going to think we were going to allow this, then I would say we'd probably consider something else, because that would be way too much trouble
Yeah.
for anyone to go
Right.
through.
So the administrative use permit would be,
It's an alternative,
It's an
because
alternative.
we could do it over the counter or do it just administratively, even if it's not over the counter.
Okay.
And then the other's just a business license and allow it.
okay. And the cost for the administrative and the conditional is the same?
No,
No,
we'd have
we
to
don't know.
determine what the administrative
Okay.
permit processing cost would be.
Okay. All right, thanks.
Okay, so if we don't have any more questions of staff, then we can open the public hearing at this time. Is there anyone who'd like to, from the public, who'd like to speak on this item? Come up to the podium, and we're going to give 3 minutes for you.
Bob Stemple, Porteous. Just listening to the staff report, the one thing that crossed my mind was that there are probably several people who are already doing this, and the fact that there were so few complaints means that things seem to be working fairly smoothly. By complaints, I mean the three different things that you brought up, Garrett. It'd be noise, traffic, and parking, probably the most common complaints that people would have in the neighborhood. The fact that there have been so few complaints means that it doesn't seem to impact the neighbors. But if you are going to create a system where this becomes illegal and standardized and whatnot, I would want to make sure that there's some type of recourse for neighbors if there were some bad apples in the bunch. If it turns out that one particular house were to have more than the average amount of people staying, more than the average amount of nights rented out, they were creating parking problems, they were not careful about, I don't know how you can be careful in Airbnb about what type of people you rent to, but if it were to turn out to be a house where there are a lot of parties and whatnot, it would be important that there be some type of a recourse for neighbors to be able to complain and there to be consequences. Otherwise, if, for example, I think one term you used was you could say that property owners by right are able to do this, that would mean that, I assume that would mean that there would be no consequences. A person who was creating a nuisance in the neighborhood could say, well, I have a right to do this, you know, it's your problem. So if you could incorporate, consider that, the potential of there being disruption in the neighborhood, and there's being some type of recourse and some type of enforcement against problem situations that may occur.
Okay, thank you. I think that's a good point, and I think that's one of the reasons why we want to consider making it a use permit instead of just, you know, permitting it outright. Are there any other public comments? Okay, so we're going to close the public comment period, and we're going to then bring it back to the commission for further discussion. Any other?
I just want to correct I thought there was some indication that we have gotten complaints about Airbnb in town already?
I think when I spoke to Linda today, we seem to recall, and we got a current one, we seem to think we've gotten complaints on 2 locations, whole house rentals, but a total of 3 complaints. So 2 complaints on one house and another complaint on another house. It doesn't mean more people wouldn't complain. Maybe they just don't know how to complain.
Did you guys all have a chance to look at what Phil sent us?
No, I think I read his comments, but I didn't have a chance to look at the contract. So did you have a chance to look at it, Mimi?
Well, I thought a good place for us to start our discussion might be his comments. And,
Okay.
I mean, he's saying allow an over-the-counter permit with a TOT remitted by Airbnb to the town, and we could determine what that amount was, or what that, I mean, do we determine what the TOT is? No, we would determine what the over-the-counter permit fee was.
Yeah, how it would work is the fee would have to be based, have a nexus to how much staff time is required for it. But the hotel tax, or what we refer to as TOT, is actually 10%. That's set by ordinance.
So if we were to go in that direction of essentially a use permit, but a streamlined way of obtaining a use permit that allowed it to be done completely by staff, that would be a one-time thing for a particular resident who wanted to do this. They would obtain this permit once, not annually. Yeah.
It'd be once, although the business license, that would be annual.
Jim, I have a question on, do you kind of have an idea how you think the administrative use permit process could work?
Well, we've kicked this around a little bit in-house, and we think that the town, I agree with, I think, your position, Garrett, that I think it would behoove the town to sort of create an intermediary step for certain use permits that could be administratively granted. They would still possibly be subject to appeal, But it is a very laborious exercise to have to bring everything back to you guys. This is a limited staff. It has limited resources. I have to say, I cringe at just even this exercise tonight because it's such a moving target, the Airbnb world, and so much litigation and other negotiations with towns are going on. And it's a wonderful endeavor, but it's a huge amount of staff time to do all these things. So if you are going to move in that direction, I think that's the way to go.
I mean, we recently did that streamlined solar ordinance process for an administrative permitting process that included like a form, that people would just check off. And I think, if staff could assess maybe what the fee might be based on that type of workload for you guys, I mean, that would be reasonable.
Also, remember, you've also done this with the adoption or the recommendation, which did get adopted by the town council for the junior second units. We can administer junior second units over the counter, which is a huge thing now happening. But I think Garrett has something to offer too.
I don't think I envision it would take more than an hour to do whatever we were going to do. One would probably be drive by the house and see what exactly, what kind of units are there. And then they would just fill out a form, and then we would just probably confirm, and away we go. But I'm thinking not more than an hour of staff time.
Okay, so would the intent be to notice the neighborhood so that you could receive any comments or feedback?
That would be up to the planning commission to suggest. I would say I wasn't thinking of noticing the neighborhood. I mean, it's a good idea, but that would take more staff time for sure.
So at this point, this is sounding simple, except as I understand it, the purpose of that administrative use permit or the mechanism of it would be like similarly with the streamlined solar permit. What needed to be done in order to make that a streamlined permit was to come up with clear guidelines. And then essentially what the streamlined solar permitting process consists of is check to see if this project fits within those guidelines. If it does, then boom, you're done, you're out of here. And so that brings it back to us to figure out, and council to figure out what the guidelines are in a clear enough way that it can be streamlined. Because if it's vague, it's not streamlined. So I think that's kind of where we are.
Can I offer up something? This is just my opinion, but I think there's an underlying philosophical discussion or debate underneath all this, and that is, the conversion of portions of residential properties for short-term commercial use in an era of rising rents and a lack of units, which adds to the lack of affordable housing. So I think there is an underlying philosophical debate in terms of what is going to help individual property owners with economic vitality versus take bedrooms out of circulation for more long-term renters. I just want to bring you back to that underlying
Absolutely,
philosophical
and
debate.
that's what I would think is. I don't think it's going to be I don't think it'd be as easy for us to figure out exactly what we're looking for in this process as to figure out that it probably needs to be a process that's midway between a business license and a full use permit. I think that's pretty clear. But how many days a year, full house, partial house, and as you say, that really comes back to some fundamental questions about, are we trying to save housing in Fairfax for more permanent Fairfax residents? What does that really mean? If somebody moves here, then they are now a permanent Fairfax resident. So what's the boundary there? But yeah, these are the bigger questions.
And it's really a tough one because you might be helping a property owner that's been here a long time hang on to their house. On the other hand, you might be helping someone who's just purchased their house adjust to this enormous mortgage that they've copped for that nobody else can afford.
I was just going to remind the commission and the public that we did have a brief. This was on the planning commission agenda at one point, in the past, I recall, because we had public comment on it. And I was kind of surprised because I expected there to be public comment on the side of saying we don't want Airbnb rentals in San Francisco. There certainly are a number of people who have weighed in on the side of not wanting Airbnb rentals in San Francisco. But the public comments that we had, which were fairly few, were on that particular night only on the side of we are actually doing this and it's really helping us. It's wonderful to have these people here. What's wrong with this? And a willingness to pay a TOT, should that come up, a willingness to have some kind of procedure put on this and pay the TOT. And tonight it sounds like we don't have public comment at all on it. So this is, I just wanted to say, this is kind of surprising to me and a little mystifying. And to anybody out there who's listening, it's kind of weird being on this dais and having to figure out something that, as Director Moore says, is a pretty deep issue, really, and in some other locations around here has been a very divisive issue, and we're not getting any input. I hope we don't get a flurry of input sometime later on that we did the wrong thing, but I'm feeling a little directionless from the
On the
public
contrary,
right now.
I guarantee you, if there's a draft ordinance before you, you will get output.
Before you before I take your comments, Mimi, I just want to go back to the use permit process before I forget my thought and before we stray too far away from that, because I know we can no longer put items on consent now under the use permit, so I'm just wondering, I'm just concerned that we can do this administrative process and still call it a use permit without noticing people. So I just think that you should look maybe more carefully into that item.
So maybe a little clarification. Administrative use permits, and I've done them before in other places, and what they are is they're clearly that. They're done by staff. It's just that it's more than just a business license application, and we ask for a certain amount of information. And so really what we're asking for is more of a base question is there's all these policy issues here of some direction, and then there's a policy issue of what level of review. And so staff can figure out what the actual application would be and how to review and what the criteria would be. But we would like to know if the Planning Commission is saying, because administrative use permit doesn't require a public hearing, it doesn't need to go to the Planning Commission, unless the Planning Commission wants to create a hybrid process. But I don't think you do, wanting those to come back to you. But if you wanted us to notify the neighborhood that just this permit's been pulled, we can do that. I'm not sure from our end we would want to take comment from the neighbors and if they opposed it or whatnot. And more importantly, I'm thinking, obviously, if we do something like this, it doesn't mean we can't go back and change it at some point. So you're almost seeing, let's see how this works. Let's see if this really is an issue. But as Commissioner Ackerman pointed out, once we start doing code amendments, then you'll really find out, because you'll have to have public hearings for that.
Well, I would just want to make sure, I think that was a good point that the public commenter made about recourse if there are problems, so that the neighbors have a process to complain. And I would also want to make sure that there wasn't like a proliferation or concentration of these type of units in one particular neighborhood, because I know if there were, 6 of them on my street, it would impact, the neighborhood a lot. And so I think that we wouldn't want to have them all concentrated in one particular
That's a
neighborhood.
very astute observation, because I think, correct me if I'm wrong here, but one of the complaints we got was parking issues on the street and parking in an area that exacerbates a blind curve.
Okay, Mimi?
Yeah. So on the question of the deeper philosophical questions that underlie this, I'm really not overly concerned about the impacts on affordable housing. I think some of what Garrett reported back in terms of what the average revenue a year being $5,300, the average nights per year where a unit might be rented out at 47, I think there's a serious economic difference between a second unit and what kind of financial benefit a homeowner gets from that versus this type of scenario. And so I am kind of liking the flexibility that allowing for Airbnb might provide to somebody who could use, you know, an additional 5,300. Maybe their kid is home from college certain months out of the year, and this is just the way to deal with it as opposed to a full-time yearly tenant. So I kind of think this might fit a piece of the puzzle that doesn't necessarily have a big impact on the affordable housing issues. So, you know, I kind of like it for that reason. I don't like the idea of giving notice to the neighborhood. I think let sleeping dogs lie. If nobody noticed what was going on here, fine, but allowing for recourse if there's a concern, I think is also a good idea. You know, if an issue arises, either because of a proliferation of Airbnb visitors in a particular area, or if there's a party house situation and you can't get any sleep at night or whatever, I think that building into this administrative process that we're considering, an ability for a neighbor to come and say, I need this permit, this administrative permit to be reviewed, or some sort of level of review, either to the planning department or to the commission. Somehow we build that in. I think that might be a better idea. And okay, so those are my thoughts for the moment.
Through the chair. I agree with Commissioner Newton's assessment that this is not a detriment to our housing stock or the affordability of our stock. And if anything, we've had many people come before us several months back when we had a discussion on this topic, and contrary to popular belief, we do listen to what people come and tell us. And I remember at least 3 or 4 people and a couple of letters coming in support of Airbnb. I don't have a problem philosophically with it. I think the idea of an administrative use permit is good, and a business license, because it does create a type of business, and it also gives the town more controls should anything go awry. And a use permit is something that, if becomes problematic, could be brought back to the staff or the planning commission or the town council. I would like to see some requirements that include, one, the ability to review and revoke an administrative permit. I think modeling it after the junior second unit permit is a good idea. It's about the same amount of time and not really that different in terms of what we're talking about. A junior second unit is a more permanent situation, whereas this is more temporary. I don't have a problem with it for the very same reasons that Mimi discussed. I would like to see that the property be owner occupied. I think that makes all the difference, rather than having an absentee owner, which leads more to a straight rental situation, which is something different from what we're talking about. And I don't believe we need neighborhood notice. I think we do need to ensure that the unit is legal, or at least in stable condition, and that there be insurance on the property. It's easy enough for us to get a copy of the insurance and a drive-by, as you say. We do that with the junior second unit. And I think collecting TOT is critical. Having Airbnb collect that for us, one, offsets our costs a little bit, and two, gives us more control. It allows us to know which units are in play and determine if in fact they are illegal or have any code deficiencies. I think we could probably have a self-certification of some sort, like we do with the junior second units, and somewhere on there they certify that it's legal and code compliant. In terms of renting rooms versus a house, I think I'd like to start by narrowing it down to rooms. I know it does help people out. It's you know, how many of us have rented a room and shared rentals when we first bought a house, or even not owning a house? I don't believe a conditional use permit is required. I think there are enough parameters that we and staff could come up with that we could probably approve something, assuming the liability issues are taken care of, and it helps people out. So I don't see a problem with it.
Okay, Esther?
I generally agree. Is that working now? Okay. Try a different one. Okay, all right. I was saying that I generally agree with my fellow commissioners. The one thing I would like to, I guess, talk about at some point is the people renting out, tenants versus homeowners, especially with the liability, because homeowners have to carry insurance. Tenants might be a little bit different, so I don't know if that's been brought up or thought of, but I think it's just the responsibility or the burden is different, so that I think that's something to consider. I do agree that an administrative, like an over-the-counter use permit is what we should do. I think that's more efficient and better use of our staff's time. I do think that a site visit should be included as part of the process. I agree with the 10% TOT, the business license. Renting out rooms, definitely, I think, especially for families that have children in school, they don't want to rent out the room permanently, but it does, gives them the option to generate income and then have it available when their kids come home for the summer. So yes, I think that one is a very good one. The whole house rental, I'm on the fence about that. I think it might work if there is a mechanism to regulate or to cite. There should be recourse for the residents in case there is a party house. I think that should be prohibited as part of the law, party houses. But there should be a mechanism to monitor and regulate that. The second unit, I'm kind of on the fence about, just because I do think that, the housing shortage is a big deal, and philosophically, I think the second unit should go to our residents, but I don't know, I'm a little bit on the fence about that. I think amending or having a chance to review and revoke a permit, I think is a good thing to have. And noticing the neighborhood, I don't think that's a good idea. I think, as Commissioner Newton said, let sleeping dogs, what is it, sleep? Lie. Yeah, I think a lot of times attracting attention, some people are just always looking for something to keep them busy. I just don't think, I think it might provoke certain people to, I don't know, to behave differently than they normally would. So anyway, those are my thoughts on the.
Chair Carolyn, just one comment on something Commissioner Gonzalez-Parver said, which is, no party house. And, I definitely think that the neighbors need a way to, appeal to the town for some relief if that situation arises. I agree. I'm glad my neighbors don't have that ability for me, though. And, but, I thought I heard on the radio recently that there are some new rules applicable to Airbnb in terms of trying to make sure that individual Airbnb hosts are not discriminating against people who try to, reserve a place and then, they say, oh, well, it's not available. And then the people who are trying to reserve notice that it's back online and available again, even though they were told that it wasn't. And I think there may be some difficulties in terms of Airbnb hosts, and this is, I think, still sort of in its early stages now, sort of working out how do you screen the people that are coming in, and Airbnb trying to ensure that people aren't being discriminated against. So it's an interesting tension. I think I just wanted to throw that out there.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I mean, it's like any business has the right to refuse service. It seems that right should be part of the whole deal. I mean, it should be the resident's right to refuse a tenant. So, but now it's getting a little bit dicey, sounds like. Wow.
Well, I concur and appreciate the comments of the commissioners. I guess the only thing that I would add is that on the whole house rentals, I concur with the comments I've heard that we somehow would like to avoid getting into whole house being rented all year round, because that really is taking a house off of the market. There's no question about it. And it's driving the price up of housing, because basically the amount of money that an owner of a house can make by renting all year round to a continual series of Airbnb people is going to be greater than what rents normally are for a permanent rental. So that tweaks the market in a really negative way. But on the other hand, for, let's say, one of us wanted to go visit our relatives some distance away and spend a month or two with our relatives in some other part of the country or the world, and we went to Airbnb to find someone, sort of like a house sitter, but also to make a little bit of income, but to watch the cat and water the plants while we were gone. And they did that one time. I would see no problem whatsoever with that, and that's a perfectly reasonable use of Airbnb. And so I wouldn't want to go so far in the direction of trying to prevent these sort of successive year-round whole house rentals that we end up taking away the opportunity for someone to find a person to live in their house while they're traveling on a one-time basis. And the other thing could be said with the other kind of rental, a partial house rental, if it's the, Garrett stated that according to Airbnb, the average length of stay is 3.7 days and the average number of days per year is 47, but the average doesn't tell us what the edges are. And so there may be people who are doing it year round and essentially running a hotel in one room of their house. And again, probably making more money if they do in fact find people all year round, which I don't know if they do, but if they did, they would make probably more money at that than they would by renting to a local resident and allowing someone to actually have a reasonable life and enjoy living in this town and pay reasonable rent. So you've got these edges, these boundary conditions that, so sorry I don't have a solution to those problems, but I just am pointing them out.
Okay, so I don't know if I made the list of the points that Garrett first spoke of, and I think that we've all touched on them, but should we poll to see how we feel about them, so we can, I think that would be helpful for moving on with this item. So I don't know, let me see, what have I got here? I guess the single rooms versus the whole house. What's,
I don't care.
okay?
I would say that what we would be shooting for is that a whole house rental would be okay if it were for a sort of a one-time basis or an occasional basis, but not something where you basically don't even live in the house and you just rent it out to someone else through Airbnb. I think that's the distinction we'd be trying to achieve.
So maybe you'd be setting a maximum number of days you could rent out the whole house over the course of a year? Is that the thought pattern? Okay.
Yeah, I think that sounds like a reasonable request. Otherwise, I didn't have an opinion versus the room versus the whole house, but I think that's a good point that Bruce added about limiting number of days.
I thought Bruce's point was actually limiting number of days, both for the one room and the whole house.
Well, I think we can ask that question next. What about that? Yeah.
Through the chair, a question for staff. I think that TOT regulations have a maximum of 28 days, 28 consecutive days, after which it's no longer a TOT, it's a permanent rental by most TOT regulations. But a continuous 29 days is probably too much for us. I'm not sure.
I'm not sure I'd agree, because I think in the situation Bruce was talking about, like if I was going to fly to Australia for the month, I'd want to maybe have that one-time option.
And I guess another question I neglected to mention is, let's say that our family, one time only, wanted to go to Australia and rent our house out. And that's the only time we're going to do that. Would we then need to apply for the permit in order to do that? Or would there be some way to use Airbnb once without having to do the permit? I'm not sure that's, if it's not an expensive permit, it might not be a problem, but.
Yeah, I think they would need the permit. They wouldn't ever have to get another one, but I think they would still have
It
to go
gets
through the
pretty
process.
slippery if we don't, so I would concur.
Okay, so I think that was the next item that I had was administrative use permit or?
In the interest of time, you might
full.
just want to do like just a
Okay.
simple poll.
Yeah, that sounds like a great idea. So admin use permit,
Sure.
okay. TOT,
Absolutely.
business license,
Yeah.
okay, limit on number of days.
Not if the TOT already limits it.
Well, there's two kinds of limits we've just discussed. One is a limit that that Norma mentioned for, and I would not say we should get into that. The TOT may already have a limit, but that's not our business. But as Mimi said, if someone wanted to leave town for 2 months, one time only in their entire life, and rent their house to someone for that 2 months, that would be kind of a silly limit for us to put on it. There's nothing wrong with that.
So just the limit on TOT at 28 days, which is interesting, that may or may not be limiting your ability to regulate beyond the 28 days within the Airbnb construct, just so you know that. My guess is, it's a legal question, my guess is you could still regulate the amount, whether it's 5 months, 6 months.
And I guess I would say, maybe we should consider a total. So you could have 28 days and then a few days off and then 28 days and stay within the TOT, but over the year, rack up 79 days or whatever, So, I mean, we don't know what those fringe numbers were that you were talking about, Bruce. you know, I would throw out a 6-month max. I mean, you know, I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. 6 months seems like a reasonable starting point.
Cumulative 6 months.
We've talked about a scenario where somebody has their kids off to college, for example, and their kids are going to reoccupy their house during the summer, but they're going to be gone, let's say, approximately 9 months a year. So maybe they would want to use Airbnb for that, but they probably aren't going to be able to continuously keep the house occupied during those 9 months, and so maybe 6 months total would not be a hardship for them. But that's the other limit that we've talked about in terms of days. There's the continuous limit, which I don't feel like I support. The one continuous rental limit, I don't feel like I support getting into that. But the limit on the total rental time per year is one that that's what I think.
Michelle just mentioned that she believes that San Francisco's gone towards 6 months cap.
Right, 6 months, I think 6 months is too much, personally. Total for the year, I think.
Total. Wait, it's a limit. You can narrow it later, yeah?
Yes, you could set a limit. Now, just remember, TLT, we'll have to go back and look at it. Typically, in most places, TLTS, that only, there's a certain limit. Usually it's less, over 30 days, and you can't collect it. But that was typically before you had this concept of short-term rentals. So I would say it's something we would need to look at. But all it does is it just governs what we're allowed to collect. It has nothing to do with how long someone could rent something out.
Can you clarify, however, or confirm, a short-term rental is 30 days, less than 30 days?
Only for purposes, typically as for
Oh, it is
hotel
for-
tax,
okay.
typically in most places, if you were to have some type of lodging longer than 30 days, like say a mobile home park, then you couldn't collect the hotel tax.
I see.
But that typically was before short-term rentals. That's a completely different thing. I don't think that actually applies the same form or fashion, but I don't know, we'd have to figure it out. But it doesn't mean we couldn't change it.
Yeah, it seems that maybe there should be a definition for short-term under the code that has nothing to do with TOT for our purposes.
I think we could look at that. I think the whole goal is to be able to collect TLT. If someone were to rent it out for 6 months, maybe that's a completely different issue. It was straight because there is no rule now that someone can't lease their house for 6 months.
Okay, so I don't think I had any other of the points that you made, or does any other commissioners have another?
The only point
Comment?
you didn't mention, Madam Chair, is the owner-occupied nature of the property.
And I think that goes back to if you're just renting a room or if you're renting out the house.
Or are you referring to
As opposed to an owner who lives elsewhere and this is a rental property.
You would like this to be their primary
A
residence?
primary residence
Whether
of
they
the
rent it out
owner,
or not.
Whether they live there all year or not.
Which dovetails sort of with what where Bruce was going in terms of, well, let's say you're going away to Europe for 5 months. You're still your primary residence and you're going to do an exchange or something. It's something to think of.
And then the second unit?
Yeah, I guess that would be the other item. Okay to, for Airbnb for a second unit? Yes?
No.
Yeah.
I'm okay with that. No?
I don't see a problem with it.
No.
No, we're split.
I have concerns about turning second units into short-term rentals because at that point you are affecting your housing stock and your rental prices, and it would make a typical rental likely bring in less revenues than a short-term rental property would.
Do you think that allowing the second unit to be Airbnb might actually encourage some people to come in who have a second unit that may not be legal and legalize it because Airbnb is a more attractive solution to them than actually, I mean, that was where I was thinking, that it might actually allow some of these owners who haven't legalized their second units to sort of see some solution for their particular property. I know, I think there are a fair number of people who have illegal units. They may be empty, they may not have any tenant in there. And if this is a path towards getting some more income, it conceivably could be a bridge to actually making it real affordable housing. It's just some of the thoughts I had.
Okay, any,
So I think you've got enough, yeah? I would just like to make a comment at the end of this worthy discussion. And I'm just struck, again, as so many times in these meetings, how the public process that we're all a part of right now, and forgive me sounding professorial and giving a little bit of speech here, but I just want to tell you, and for the members at home, and the few that are here, and who might be watching this recording, this is the early makings of a zoning ordinance regulation. Zoning ordinances under the California law are police powers. It's law. What you all are noodling now is the first incubation of a zoning ordinance to regulate something. And it's wonderful to watch how important and how informative all of our opinions are, and how great it is to live in a democracy where we get to share our opinions and learn from disagreeing with one another. That's what democracy is about, in my opinion, humble opinion. And that's what we're doing. And that's what we've been doing in creating a general plan and a housing element and ordinances to change zones. It's not about playing gotcha in the 11th hour. It's about coming together in a positive, collaborative fashion instead of dividing people up of them and us, but working collaborative. And it just strikes me so wonderful how we learn from listening to one another. So thank you again.
thank you.
So special thanks to the commission for going through this process with me. I'll report back to the council, and then I guess I'll report back to the commission.
Okay. So, thank you. So we're going to move on. And so if anyone's here who came late, 1719 Broadway, that's been requested to be continued by the applicants. So then the next item will be 23 Broadway.
Okay, and Linda's not with us yet, but I'm authorized to stand here and make a correction, or sit here and make a correction at any rate, which is that...
Just a second.
Yeah.
I'm just pointing out that I think there might be a couple of people in the audience who might have expected to be able to speak to the 19 Broadway question, even though it's going to be brought up for continuance. No?
Lou's saying no.
Okay, just watching. All right, well, this is the place to be, no question.
Thanks, Lou. Okay, so I have to confess, we were hoping Linda would be back. I think she'll be here imminently if you have any questions that I can't adequately answer. But this is a design review for exterior changes to the commercial building, the Old Sleeping Lady. And let me just start by making one correction in the staff report under discussion. The last paragraph, even though we work hard, Mimi, to get rid of stupid typos, they do happen now and then. In the last paragraph, it says proposal includes painting a 16.5 square foot sign with the sign copy K. That is not correct. The name of the business will be Tamal, T-A-M-A-L, in black lettering. And then to not get into the details of the staff report, this is just something, a quirk in our code again, that exterior changes like this in the central commercial area have to come to you. This is very minor. We fully support the changes being called for. It was just our duty to bring it before you tonight. And if you have-
We're functioning as the design review committee at this
That's
point.
correct.
Yes.
And you basically just bless these in the section of the code on design review. There's actually no findings, so that's why you don't get a resolution. You just approve or not approve. But again, staff concurs with these requested exterior changes, and that would conclude our abbreviated staff report with one correction.
Okay, are there any questions of staff?
I just have a question. It's a design, I guess a design question. Where the tile is proposed to go, what is it now, stucco or plaster?
Yes, it's stucco.
Okay, all right.
We think it'll look nice, you know.
Yeah, no, I think it's a nice design. I like the tile. Do we know if that's porcelain tile or ceramic tile? Just curious.
I'm sorry?
Do we know if that is porcelain tile or ceramic tile? We don't know. Just porcelain is so much more durable. I was just curious.
I don't know, I apologize. Sorry, it's ceramic?
It's ceramic? Okay.
And the applicant is here. If you're done with any questions from us,
Okay.
you can ask them to speak up and
Okay.
follow up. And they probably do a much better job of answering questions than I can.
Okay, all right.
So would applicants like to make us come to the podium and we can ask? Because I had a few questions.
Hello to all of you. So yes, it is ceramic tile. It's nice looking, and I think it will be a nice addition to the building. Just as far as our restaurant goes and what we're trying to portray, I think it's a nice look, and features are limited really in terms of not really blowing up in someone's face or eye. It's very simple, but a little elegant, I think.
So I had so is that like a custom tile you're having, or did you find one that was in that pattern?
I found it in a pattern somewhere on the internet, and it's a unique pattern that I think exemplifies kind of who we are in terms of, you know, our concept as a restaurant. So yeah, it's in order. I didn't design it.
Okay. Well, it does look like it matches kind of what your theme is. And at first I was kind of unsure that maybe it was too much, and I
Yeah.
kind of looked briefly up and down the street, because I think the idea with the tile was great, because it goes along with the traditional storefront, and I think it'd really enhance the building. But then up the street at the surf shop and at Taste, they have kind of like that yellow and blue kind of fleur-de-lis
Yeah.
tile, and I'm like, so there's kind of an example of another business that has something that's kind of unique
Yeah.
like that. So I think that this would be fitting
Yeah, and I mean,
at its location.
I've seen a lot of the businesses and the buildings that have some of the tiling on the bottom. Grillies is another one that just has a theme tile to their style as well. And I don't see it being too much of a thing that would get in someone's way of saying it looks pleasant. So that's the idea on it.
Through the chair, I find the design really attractive, and I, for one, always favor the storefront tiles. I think it harkens back to the village character that we have in Fairfax, and probably all our buildings had tile at some point. Can you tell us a little bit about your menu?
Sure. Well, the menu will feature, regional taste of Mexico, anywhere from where you're serving seafood to doing some of the greasy, crunchy taco style additions. The menu would be 15 items to 18 items, all priced pretty relative to around $15, $12. Dishes meant to either be shared by 2 people, maybe 3, maybe 4. You might order four dishes and be happy, or possibly just have 1 to yourself because they're going to be delicious. And it's a working menu for people to enjoy the evening, whether it's yourself or with friends or family, really. So it's a real easy menu to understand. It's got appetizers that are based off of some of the fried tacos, and with whether it's vegetarian or some of the braised meats, we're going to have those options. So it's meant to.
Oh, good, so you'll have some vegetarian.
You bet, yeah,
You say taco and I'm sold.
Yeah, no, it's going to be well balanced, that's for sure.
Do you serve lunch and dinner, breakfast, lunch and dinner? What's your plan?
As it's planned, the front of the house won't be open during the day until 5. We'll start somewhat of a happy hour early, and then lunches will be something that will be a taqueria style, which you'll come to the back to order, and instead of having a full service restaurant in the day, I just don't see that being where we're wanting to go. Of course, if people are really in love with our lunches, we might reconsider, I would say. But right now, we want to concentrate on the evenings as our focus and offer tacos in a little different style than you're used to, more of a casual kind of stand-up, have it. You know, you can sit in the back area, but we're not going to allow people to sit up front necessarily and have the bar open or anything like that. That's for our evenings. Yeah. Okay, thank you, yeah.
So if you're serving from the back, would people come in through mono?
Well, that's something I really want to try to influence people, is because I think the back area I'm putting in some nice touches to, and I just don't want it to sit there lonely all the time during the day when the sun's out. And on the weekend, we're going to be open for a lunch earlier, obviously, maybe if it's 12 through the afternoon and run into the evening. Our menu works that way. It will be very similar, you know. But during Monday through Friday, it's something I'd like people to see the back area and enjoy it. The seating's there, and it's, you know, if it's raining, I guess that's just an off day, really. You know, it's casual. So.
I think that's a great idea. I love
Thank you.
that idea.
Yeah, well, I realize we're a little off topic because we're only doing design review of the building, but yeah, I love the idea of coming in from the back, and especially as a bicyclist.
Yeah.
I would be able to come up mono, stay out of the traffic, and probably have, you know, a place to park the bike back there that would be within my sight while I was sitting out there in the back. It would just be a really convenient thing. Might not even have to lock the bike or anything. Just, you know, that's very appealing. Yeah, well, that could be nice.
Your point there of the bicyclist and such was a generating factor to doing this back there, and trying to make that area of importance to that street, I guess, and having people access the restaurant from back there, you know, to the point where it's for them to come in and enjoy, park your bike, feel it's safe. There will be some bicycle parking, and it's going to be, I think it'll be very nice.
Just one, I'm sorry, one other question. You won't have amplified music, will you? Are you going to have bands?
Definitely not outside.
Music pumped out to the neighborhood?
No, it's, I guess I would have put it at the noise level of our conversations. As a restaurant, you need to make sure it's very equal.
Okay.
And background sound music is all it is. Yeah.
Okay, so. Are there any other questions, comments? Okay, so anyway, we're going to then bring it back to the commission, and then maybe somebody may be able to, would like to make a motion.
Okay, well, thank you.
Well, I'd be happy to make a motion to approve this design review question as it stands.
I'll second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
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 For the record, we don't anticipate any appeals, but there's a
There's a
10-day
appeal period.
$500 fee.
$500 fine. I mean, fee, sorry. Okay. All right, thank you.
Okay, moving right along.
Yes.
Okay, that gets us to item 2. And before Michelle Levinson gives the staff report in more detail, I would like to just give a little bit of a preface to it and sort of explain where we are tonight. And then I may chime in after Michelle's more detailed staff presentation. And Michelle, please feel free to correct me after I've sort of chimed in with my understanding of how we got here tonight. So this is, the report before you tonight is actually recommending approval of the project. And if I understand it correctly, there had been a little back and forth between the applicant and our staff in the early analysis of this project with regards to the driveway, and particularly with regards to the unpermitted retaining wall section of the driveway that is, as I understand it, actually attached to these redwood trees. And so after a fair amount of wrestling back and forth on whether to include that in the application or not, Staff went forward out of deference to the applicant, and if you look at the resolution, it is heavily articulated on page 2 at the second whereas, the caveats about going forward with getting approval for legitimating the retaining wall on the driveway. And in fact, if you look at the last sentence of the second paragraph under 2, it says the project will not receive a final inspection or an occupancy permit until the wall is completed. So again, out of deference to the applicant and keeping this moving, that's where we were when this was written and printed and distributed last Friday. Then, I believe in the last 24 hours, we actually were forwarded a report from an engineer on the condition of the retaining wall going up the driveway, not just the disposition around the trees, and a preliminary look by staff at that report. And again, feel free to correct me if I'm wrong at any point after I give my little chime in. We realized that, oh my gosh, we need to have the town civil engineer look at this. We need to have this digested, and we like to bring these civil engineer issues to you guys at the time that you're granting improvements to a house like this, because there's always a discovery period when our civil engineer gets involved versus what the applicant's civil engineer might be surmising is necessary. And these can often be kind of rude wake-up calls in regards to expense. And then what often happens if we defer considerations like this after you've already entitled the revisions of the house, it gets to be a really unfortunate spitting match where we're made out to be the bad guys for making something, comply with either the safety of the trees or with very costly retaining wall requirements for retaining illegal improvements. So our preference tonight is that you begin the hearing tonight, because it's been noticed, hear the more thorough staff presentation by Michelle, hear from the applicant, who I believe, and I don't want to put words in their mouth, but I think that they would like to continue on with how the staff report was written last Friday. But at this point, our recommendation is going to be, after hearing the detailed report, hearing from the applicant, give us a chance to go back and review this new information we just got in the 11th hour, so to speak, with our civil engineers, so we can give you a more learned representation of what we think is going on in the access to this building that's being asked to be improved. So, is that fair? Okay, and with that, Michelle can now give her report.
Thank you. The project site is located at 145 Forest and is 17,346 square feet in area. The site slopes up from Forest Avenue and contains a one-story, 1,671 square foot residence that is 13 feet high, approximately. The project would involve the renovation of the residence by extending the rear wall out by 4 feet, creating 94 square feet of additional area in a combined living and dining area. In addition, the eastern exterior wall would be extended 2 feet to create an 18 square foot master bedroom closet. The front porch would be extended and covered by an arbor, and a deck would be constructed over an existing concrete pad. As detailed in the staff report, the original project that was submitted to staff back in January included reference to improvements to the retaining wall, but no detailed information about that work. Staff inspected the site at that time, and we determined that the wall was deteriorating a great deal, and it posed potential risks to mature redwood trees and potentially to the roadway below. And at that time, we requested additional information about the work to the wall. In response to that, and I believe that was in June, the next round in the formal application removed the wall from the planning application. And when staff questioned that, the applicant stated that they were going to pursue approvals for that work separately. Staff advised the applicant at that point that staff's preference would be that those projects be pursued at the same time, and relayed to the applicant that any approvals or building permits for the residential work would be contingent upon the approvals and building permit for the retaining wall. So as Jim stated, on Wednesday night, we received an engineering report and the arborist report for the wall work. And staff was not able to confer with the town engineer or the town arborist about the improvements or the potential risks to the trees. The methods that are proposed to repair the wall are somewhat atypical. So the town engineer's input is really needed. So staff at this point, as Jim stated, requests that the commission continue the item to October, and that will give the staff the opportunity to confer with the town engineer and the arborist about the repair work and any potential risks or mitigation measures to the trees, and modify the staff report and resolution as needed.
Right, and I would add also, I forgot to mention, in addition to the owner and his architect, I believe, here tonight, we have a neighbor who's also shown up to speak to the item too. So again, our recommendation is go ahead, start the public hearing, and then if you concur with us after going through this exercise to continue it to a time certain in October so that we don't have to renotice it, and then we can continue the public hearing then.
And if I can just add, a letter from the neighbor was included in your folders.
Right, just recently.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone have questions of staff before we open the hearing?
I do. Just with respect to the neighbor's letter, there was some discussion in there not only about the timing of the fixing of the retaining wall in terms of the work being done at the residence, but also additional information about parking and road work, apparently. And I just want to know if you have any thoughts about those issues, and make sure that those are considered if we do decide to continue this.
Yes, we received this letter today, just a couple of hours before this meeting. So we haven't had the chance to go out to the site and really inspect and see what the parking situation is. But yes, would.
And I haven't even read the letter.
Yeah.
Okay, any other questions, staff? Okay, would the applicant like to come forward and say a few words?
I would, but I think I'd like to have my architect start.
I'm going to turn this on. Very loud right here. So thank you for hearing us this evening. Staff represented the sort of back and forth that we've done on this project. It's a very small addition that we're doing to the house, and it's really all about timing at this point. The intention from the very beginning of the process was to, the owner was interested in doing the retaining wall and the house. We started with both of those in one set of drawings as we're doing our initial discussions with staff. Then we realized that it's a different engineer that would be doing the retaining wall work, it's a different contractor, and why have it on the same set of drawings? Might as well pull it apart, and the owner wanted to actually do that work directly with the engineer and the other contractor, so it made sense. Once we then sort of pulled those two pieces apart and then submitted, staff, as was described, had the concern about the retaining wall maybe not being done at some point. So it's fully the intention of our team to get that work done. The only question is the timing and how you elect to tie it to either, the beginning of the, so the approval of the retaining wall gets tied either to the beginning of the approvals process for the house, or the end of the approvals process for the house, which would be getting the final permit after building department review, or some other point. I've seen in other projects that we've done that the city, various cities will tie a condition of approval to a point such as, getting your framing inspection, so that the project doesn't get too far down the road before X, Y, and Z gets done, either on the site or in the right-of-way. Many, many other things like that happen. So I think it's a very conventional and not unusual request that we have, which is that you take the review of the house and, if you see fit, approve that this evening, hopefully, and put a contingency on, or a condition on the actual retaining wall, so that we can work with the town arborist, the town engineer. We've brought in, and granted it was sort of at the last minute in order to get these things submitted. We got the arborist report and the professional engineer report. He's a geotechnical engineer, so we definitely got the right person looking at the retaining wall. They've determined that it's largely supported on the trees, and that it's not in imminent, it doesn't look good, but it's not in imminent danger of falling. And we have a remediation plan that's represented in both of those letters that would actually install piles behind the wall in order to support the driveway. And because it's the driveway, if this is the retaining wall, the driveway that's on top, and it's in fact just a pull-out portion of the driveway in order to enable a three-point turn. It's not the driveway itself. So this pull-out portion, by sitting on the top of the retaining wall, has sort of settled and pushed the top of the retaining wall out. So this will be lifted up and re-supported completely, and then the existing retaining wall and its intermingled redwood trees would be left in place. Once the load is taken off of that old wall, the few boards that are there that have some deterioration just because it's poorly drained could be easily replaced. So that's basically what both of these letters are describing. It would not be sort of a design review issue, because it's not changing the sort of visible condition. So what we would ask is that you actually make that a condition that we can work with staff and all the appropriate people at the town to confirm that our approach is acceptable, but that we would be able to, for the house, submit for a building permit and have that process start as well, because we're looking at the town's grading moratorium and the rains that are coming, hopefully. And we want to be able to start the housework as soon as possible and not be delayed by having to sort of bring all of this back to you 5 weeks from now.
Through the chair, I have a question for the applicant. Is the retaining wall we're discussing, and I know you can't possibly see this from where you sit, but
I'll put on my glasses.
This is the layout of the plans we received. You're talking about the retaining wall that's up on top,
Correct.
adjacent to the driveway and not at the rear of the property.
Exactly.
Not a rectangle, but approximately what's the length of that area?
The length was, the actual linear length hasn't come up, but it's probably 30 feet, maybe. And it's actually, we're showing diagrammatically that dashed line to represent where it is, but the geotechnical engineer has actually come back in his report and said that there's only portions of it that actually would need support, and some portions of it are not sort of acting as a retaining wall. But that is the sort of extent, start to finish, of where we'd be making sure that everything meets everybody's requirements.
Go ahead, Mimi, you have a question?
Yeah, did you have a chance to see Ms. Peterson's letter?
I saw that the owner had it. I didn't read through it or digest it. No, but I believe that's the property on the left side. And as you're sort of facing the house, which on the plan would be on the right, and at least the retaining wall work that we're talking about is at the street on the left side, not over where that neighbor's house is.
So, and I'm sure, I think you're Ms. Patterson or Peterson. So maybe you're going to comment during the public comment, but and maybe you can come back after she talks, because, she's raised two issues that I'd like to hear from you about. One being the timing of the work on the house and the repair of the retaining wall, to the extent that there might be exacerbation of the already deteriorating situation by additional construction-related vehicles driving over that area, and whether or not there's a hazard presented. And then the other issue being the parking on her property that may also be potentially damaged by, I think, construction vehicles, but I'll let you talk.
Well, I can sort of roughly address those, which is that there would be some, maybe once or twice heavier vehicles coming. These would mostly be pickup trucks that would be coming up. Nothing larger could get up this very narrow and very steep driveway. So people would be, material would be walked up and down largely. The exacerbation question, I don't think that is actually an issue. Number one, likely the contractor would start that work first because it's easy to get to, and it's a separate contractor who's ready to do that at any time. So they would jump in and start that right away. But this is, again, it's a turnout, not the driveway proper. So it's something that was put there, for, by a previous owner of the property, presumably to make a more easy three-point turn. So, that doesn't need to be used, and it wouldn't be parked on by anybody, certainly while the work is happening, because part of that area that's paved up at the top of that turnout would actually be cut back so that these piles that I was describing could be installed. So that would all be a work area right at the beginning of the project, and then it would be repaved and in perfect condition. So I don't think that's a real concern, that it would deteriorate.
Would that be true if, as you're requesting, we moved ahead with allowing the work on the residence today, and brought the retaining wall back for another review in the future, I mean, it sounds like you wanted to move forward with some of the work on the residents sooner rather than later.
Well, certainly, I mean, it would be great to move forward with the actual work, but what we, certainly like to do is submit for a building permit next week. So in order to do that, we need to have the approval for the house at least. And my suggestion about the condition of approval would be that staff, that you say the concept of fixing the retaining wall is what you want and that you'll require it, in fact, and we're great with you adding that as a requirement because we're doing it. But the idea that we could work with staff to work out the details of that for them to review the engineer's calculations and all of that, that's going to take some time for that to happen. So we just don't want to have to come back to a public hearing in order to review those things that staff reviews, because I think that, the result would be either a thumbs up or a thumbs down, and the Planning Commission doesn't necessarily need to hear whether staff approves something, just like, the building department, when we submit our calculations for the building addition, that's their job, is to
Excuse me,
either
sir,
allow it or
is
not.
that true? Would they not have to come back anyway to the Planning Commission for the retaining wall?
I think we just don't have enough information to know if discretionary approval for the
Thank
wall
you.
is required.
That is the problem we're having, sir. And I understand your situation, but actually I'm rather disappointed that you didn't take staff's advice in the first place and provide this information, which you apparently very quickly threw together, so quickly that we've not even had a chance to review it for this evening's meeting. So I, for one, am very concerned about conditionally approving something based on information that somewhat recommends different actions and that has not been reviewed by any of our engineering professionals.
Madam Chair, can I make a recommendation? We're sort of at the point of asking questions of the applicant, and then you'll hear from the neighbor who's here, and then after you've gone through that exercise, I'd like to echo some of the things you just said. So if, we might want to move through that process and then get back to where we can discuss the finer details that are coming up.
Good point. So does anyone, if I can just clarify, you mentioned, so are you saying you would like to move, I'm a little confused as to, should the retaining wall work be done first or the house work? I mean, that's one thing I'm kind of confused about, because if there is going to be a moratorium, I would think we maybe would want to fast track the retaining wall. So I just wanted to, if you could clarify exactly what would be your preferred method of construction process.
Could
In
I,
terms of the
could I suggest what I think I heard, just to try to put it in terms that we would understand. I think I'm understanding that there's sort of two separate projects, the retaining wall and the house. They don't really interact with each other. In fact, they're separate engineering people and so forth.
Not in our mind, in their mind.
No, okay, all right. I'd be interested in knowing how they link in that way. But that one linkage for sure is that the town, and I would say the applicant as well, and everyone in the neighborhood has a strong interest in the retaining wall being taken care of and being taken care of properly. Because in fact, I'll just point out, redwoods have a very shallow root system. They're actually more delicate than they look. These huge hulking trees are actually, you just don't want to mess with them. And if they fall down, they're pretty large. So this is not something to screw around with. And it's probably a little bit complicated because driving piles in the ground right near the roots of the redwood, I'm not an arborist or an engineer, but it sounds to me like that's got to be done carefully. So it sounds like we've got one project, the house, that's construction-wise relatively straightforward, and the other project that's more complicated. and we're trying to make sure the more complicated one does not get short shrift in any way. So but maybe there's more to it than that.
I would just say that, yes, they are two physically separate and independent projects. Nothing that happens on one affects the other. They're very far away from each other physically. So that is correct. The nexus that's being created between the two is to ensure, as I understand it, to ensure that the retaining wall, which doesn't look good visually, is remediated or made safe, which we're completely, in the process of doing and completely on board with. It may look like, because those reports came in at the last minute, that they were put together quickly, but it was actually a very lengthy process that was started a long time ago. It's very difficult to get people out. Everybody's busy in construction. Several engineers came out, several arborists came out, and by the time we could get reports from them that then, a draft of one, then the other person has to read it and then revise theirs. And so finally it happened. So that's sort of the...
Yeah, well, I appreciate that this may have been inevitable or unavoidable, but nonetheless, it puts us as a commission and staff and the town's engineers in the position that we're in, and the public as well, because this hearing that we're at tonight was noticed, but now there's critical information that wasn't part of that noticing. So there's a lot of reasons why we can't approve and finish up with the approval of the retaining wall work tonight. That seems abundantly clear.
I have a question about the site. I just want to make sure I understand what's going on with the site. It looks like off of Forest Avenue, you're going uphill up the driveway, and I guess it kind of flattens out where you have that retaining wall. And that retaining wall is holding the driveway and that looks like a parking, maybe drop-off area.
The turnout, as
right.
we're calling it.
And the landscape then slopes down to the street. So in essence, that retaining wall is well, it's not holding up the driveway, but part of that driveway. It's retaining that soil, correct?
That's correct, right.
Okay.
And we don't know when that was added, whether all of the retaining wall was added when the turnout was installed at some point in the past, or whether there was a retaining wall there already, and then the turnout was added. So.
And what is on Forest Avenue directly below that turnout or turnaround? Is that parking or is it just roadway?
That is just roadway, right. And you can see it more clearly on the survey, on the second sheet.
Okay.
Right, which has no additional notes or anything on there, so that you can see that all of that is just regular width roadway. And the parking that I think that the neighbor is referring to is on the other side of the property at the top of the page on the survey sheet, where there's
Yeah. How long has the applicant lived at this address? How long have you lived at this address?
Hi, I'm Vic Hill Jr. I've lived there a little more than a year.
Okay. Was it in the disclosures that this retaining wall was not permitted?
Nope, was not. And I actually went and looked at all the permits. I looked at the file. It's really not clear to me that it is unpermitted because the files have, they're paper files, they're no drawings, they're kind of sketches. But in any case, whatever it is, it doesn't work, permitted or not. And I'd say I moved in this house to be near my grandchildren and my daughter and my son-in-law who live down the street. and they've lived here quite a long time. And I love the site. The house has lots of issues. There's been many unpleasant surprises, and this is just another one of them. But from the very beginning, this has always been a commitment that I retain, that I fix the retaining wall as well as the foundation of the house. The house is not level, it's not seismic protected, et cetera, et cetera. So although this is a small project square foot wise, there's really a fair amount of work being done under the scenes. And I would say when I first had 3 different house leveling people come out and said, I also want you to address the retaining wall. One said, I don't do it. The others said, it's fine. It's not anything you need to do immediately. Since then, we've had 2 more engineers come out, and they both have said the same thing. So I don't believe there's any imminent danger. I believe you made a mistake when you said the retaining wall was deteriorated along the driveway. It's not the driveway itself. That part of the retaining wall is fine. It's just the top, which is the turnaround. So I don't feel like there's an issue there. The general plan is the contractor who, we have a general contractor and we have a sub, would do all of this basically first thing. They would do the house leveling, the foundation, they would repair the retaining wall. And so that's one piece. The only other thing, I wanted to say is the redwood trees seem to be fine. I think both arborists have said they're fine, and they said our recommendations. One of them said, "I'll tell you what to do, but I'm not going to write any letters." He's not a letter arborist; he's a person who just does the trees. Said, "Keep any piles, any driving away from the roots, and the trees will be fine." The second one said, if we replace the existing, like take out the wood ones and then stick in steel, which is what I would prefer, it is definitely going to be a problem for the trees. You have to drill in like an 18-inch, just as you were saying, you have to bore an 18-inch hole. So they have come up with this plan that involves 3.5-inch pipe piles, 3 feet away from any roots. If it goes down and hits a root, the plan is we can see that, we can pull it out, we can move the pile over. So I think that is a non-conventional, it's what was referred to as a non-conventional approach. It definitely has to be vetted by the city engineers. And I think if your building engineer says, no, you've got to do it differently, we'll do it differently. It's certainly more expensive to do this than to just drive steel, but I like redwoods, so I'm inclined to protect them. Okay, any other questions?
Actually, just a design question about the deck. It sounds like this is a deck over an existing concrete patio?
Oh, yeah, so I was advised the deck didn't need to be permitted. It's on the plans because we had to have it scoped. It's, yeah, it's over an existing concrete patio and it's 12 inches high. So we talked to, who's the building, Mark? Yeah, maybe you can
Is the
address that.
deck going to be attached to the house, or is it freestanding?
No, it's freestanding.
Okay.
It's freestanding.
Then that's correct. If it's not over 30 inches above the ground and it's not physically attached to the house, that part doesn't require a permit. But the property is substandard in size, and so any construction
Right.
still requires the use permit from you. So it's
Okay.
part of the project.
And I did want to address kind of the back and forth here. When I started this whole thing, I talked to you and I talked to Mark, and I was advised that, gee, the general building process for the house takes roughly 3 months if all goes well. But fixing the retaining wall and the other work is remedial work, and it could be done, a permit could be done in a month. So I separated these 2 projects because I thought I could get the retaining wall done first. I thought I could get that, whip that out, and that's one reason why it got separated, and it's, planning has said, no, we want it all tied back together again. So the critical thing from my perspective is the timing of it. At this point, it seems like the best timing is to tie it back together, and that'll be the quickest. So that's really what I'm asking, is that you consider that, because if we have another hearing on the 21st of October, I probably won't get a permit until the end of November, mid-November, and I'll be pushed out in construction till, I don't know, April, May, whenever it is the rain stop. If you really are concerned, I think we should move faster than that.
Now I'm getting confused. I thought that you had been asking that we essentially separate the projects and that we consider the approval of the house construction tonight with a condition that before you had suggested possibly the framing inspection, that the retaining wall has to be finished, and then we consider the retaining wall next month, because that's when we would have all the information in order to be able to do so. And then I thought I heard, I'm sorry, I didn't catch your name. Yeah, that I thought I heard you just say that you wanted to tie them together, so I'm not quite sure what you're asking.
I'll do whatever works in terms of moving ahead. They could be separate permits, they could be combined.
I think the point about if they're separate, but they're still tied together, then we can't move forward with the house and the permitting for the house until, we go through another public hearing and then submit for permit and building department review of the.
So is it correct to state that your essential issue is the timing of being able to get started on the house construction? That's
Right.
That's what you're kind of concerned about right now.
And we're kind of putting out, maybe it's a couple of different, suggestions or ideas about if you did need to see the retaining wall in front of this body, again, then you could, separate the two and require that the retaining wall be completely satisfied and permitted by X point, maybe framing or whatever. Or the other choice would be to have the condition that directs staff and the town arborist and the town engineer to fully review and approve, and if they don't approve, then
well, that latter approach would seem to me to be problematic, in that if the staff, for one thing, staff may not be willing to or procedurally able to do the entire review of the retaining wall without the planning commission weighing in, because that's sort of what the process normally is. And secondly, if you started on construction of the house with the assumption that the retaining wall were going to be successfully permitted, and then that turned out to be more complicated than it looked like it was going to be, then you've got a half-finished house with the rain season coming. So there's some problematic issues in all this. But anyway, I think I'm getting anyway clear on what you're asking for, and we still have the public hearing to hear. So.
And if you were to do that, as you describe, and if the retaining wall were to be a Pandora's box and get more complex, the risk of that is on the owner, that he would have to deal with it, whether it's before or after an approval of the addition to the house.
Yes.
You can always go back for further questions, but we've got someone patiently sitting from the public. You might want to hear from her. And then with where this is going, I got some comments I'm anxious to.
Okay. So would you like to please come forward to the podium?
Hi, my name is Sue Peterson. I own 139 Forest Avenue. Have lived there for 26 years. Sure. I lived there full-time until about a year ago, and my daughter currently stays there off and on. And I'm trying to empty it. My husband died some years back, and we got 26 years worth of 4 people's stuff and nobody around to help get rid of it. So that's why anyway, my daughters are part-time. Also, I want to say that I have talked to a couple of the neighbors who are very concerned about the same thing I am, which is in the letter, but I'll also reiterate. Anyway, as far as the actual remodeling plan, I don't have a problem with it. I do have a question that somebody can probably answer. I'm curious why they're moving the hot tub from the end of the deck to the middle of the deck.
It's best to make your comments and then,
Okay.
and then the follow.
Okay. My only concern about that is you can see the hot tub where it is now from the west side of my house, from pretty much every room. We've had privacy issues with naked hot tubbing before, not from him. But it's, you know, when you got kids you're raising, it's tough to have that. And I noticed on the plans it says something about a privacy screen or a fence. I'm not sure how tall, I'm not sure what is going to be the deciding factor for how tall that is. Anyway, so that's neither here nor there. Like I said, basically the plans are fine. My real concern is the retaining wall. There's been mention of a grading moratorium. It seems to me that if there's going to be any grading done, it's going to be on the retaining wall, not on the house. So maybe that's another good reason that it should be done first. But this process, if I read all my reports right, started last January. The applicant was asked for plans for the wall back then. Now it's September. The town just yesterday, last night, received plans for the wall. So it makes me question whether they really intended to do the wall first before the remodel, because they have full plans for the remodel. As far as the wall itself, the redwood trees they're disturbing. Obviously, everyone's known, at least since January, that the wall's failing and that the trees are endangered. I don't know how tall those trees are, but pretty much every neighbor within at least one property of him all the way around is in danger. And it seems almost negligent to allow the wall to continue to be there when we know it's failing. And, you know, if that means they have to wait till next spring to remodel the house, maybe that's what it means. Because it certainly took precedent in their schedule of things. And the neighbor directly across from where those trees will probably fall is quite concerned. But his wife is very ill and he couldn't come.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, one more thing.
Just-
3 minutes,
just-
is that?
yeah.
I just wanted to talk about the parking real quick. His driveway comes down, and it actually comes down to Forest. It turns at the bottom. But if you drive straight out his driveway, you're driving over my parking. So when there's a car there, it's not a problem. When there's not a car there, the tendency is to drive across my parking to go up the driveway. It's a very steep driveway, so it gives you a better oomph. And I'm concerned, that's why I'm concerned about construction trucks, pickups or otherwise, because that's going to be their tendency. So that's why I asked to have that parking area included in the roadway damage clause.
Okay, thank you for the clarification. Okay, so I don't think we have any other applicants. So you wanted to make some comments, Jim? Okay.
Just want to make an observation, and Linda, who arrived, might have other comments to chime in on. But first of all, I know it doesn't feel like it, but we are here to help applicants get through the process. And I'm reminded that the pre-application on this happened in January of this year, 9 months ago. Then the application was formally submitted in January 23rd, and here we are. But I just want to point out how ironic it is that the applicant's architect was explaining that it was determined at one point that to separate the project, because it's a separate engineer, and the owner wanted to work with the engineer on the retaining wall separate from the engineer on the house, 2 different processes. But it was the architect that started to explain the design of the wall, how they propose it to be. And also, they offered up the fact that if they get the right to start construction on the house, they want to start doing that up this driveway that has a substandard retaining wall, which we don't have any record of it being permitted. But we started to hear from the applicant details about a wall and a proposed design that we haven't had time to digest yet and have the benefit of the town civil engineer weigh in on to give you learned opinions about it. Again, we don't have any record of it being permitted. We think it's failing. It's not right where it is with the redwood trees. I think Sue makes an important point about the disposition of those trees and the danger that it poses not only to the houses around there potentially, but to the applicant's house. And heavens forbid he should actually do improvements and have a tree fall on it. And again, while they talk about the design, we don't know what that design is yet. They have a plan for it. And I did hear some reference to the concern of the applicant on the cost of going back to wood post versus metal post. And as often is the case with these steep driveways and retaining walls, it gets really expensive. And right now, the applicant wants to go ahead with putting money into the remodel of his house when he really doesn't understand or know what the cost of remediation on that driveway is going to be. And you're being asked to allow him to spend good money on the house before he even knows the disposition of the driveway and to allow trucks to drive up it. So it's unfortunate that the applicant didn't take staff's recommendation. They are tangentially linked. You get to the house up the driveway. And for other reasons, people's livelihoods are involved with this as well as the livelihood of these trees. So everything I've heard tonight reconfirms our position that you should continue this. Let us do our due diligence with the town engineer on the reports that have been rendered up today, and whether the applicant believes it or not, do him a favor by getting this intelligence to us. Do you have anything to add?
I know I missed part of this, but I just want to make sure that everyone understands that also running past these redwood trees and this wall is a drainage swale that carries a lot of water when it rains. It runs right past it. So there's other forces there that work from on one side of the wall. You've got the cars on one side of the wall. You've got a drainage swale on the other side of the trees and the wall.
And while it's very convenient often for applicants to try to bifurcate parts of a project, in our world, they're very intertwined. And until you go through the motion with the learned expertise of the civil engineer, you don't know fully how they are or are not. So the timing issue, I'm afraid, given when the pre-application discussion went on, the advice of staff that was not followed, to me, is secondary to the health and safety of the neighborhood, the trees, and the applicant himself.
Through the chair, I appreciate staff's position, and frankly, I agree with you. And I would like to just read a sentence from page 3 of Mr. Well, it's not Mr. Kuhner. Kuhner is the owner of Dennis Furby, the geotech consultant. The last paragraph on page 3. He's talking about how to address repair of the wall other than dealing with the wood that is failing. The general procedure for this remedial measure is to first saw cut and remove the outside edge of the existing slab, install the pipe piles and interconnecting beam, and then reconstruct the reinforced concrete slab independent of the wood wall. That right there tells me it's trickier than the applicants would lead us to believe, and I'm very concerned that you say, oh yeah, you always plan to do the wall first, and yet it still is being left to a period when you may or may not be able to get permits for that work, given that you've waited so late in the year? I just don't know.
I have a question of staff. Is this lot considered like on the hillside area, and would normally you would want to get the input of the town engineer?
Remodel.
So it's not subject to the HRD permit. It's not a 50% remodel on the hillside, but it is in a landslide hazard zone. And so anytime a project is in a landslide hazard zone, if we feel there are hazards, we would send it to the town engineer and request information up front, which is what we advise the applicants to do. They chose not to follow that course. Now the reports that they've submitted kind of back up our original fears when we went out and looked at that wall. So, and you know, they talked about, you know, what is actually a driveway. To staff, anywhere cars will drive is a driveway. And so for them to indicate that people are not going to get near this when a construction job is going on, it's not really believable to me, because people are going to drive wherever it's easy to drive, right? And if it's hard, if they get up there, they're not going to walk they say they're going to walk everything up, but a lot of times the job contractors aren't always on the job, and their workers just do what they want. The building official can't be out there all the time. So that's not really a feasible thing, I believe. And we can't monitor it. We don't have the staff to do that.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question, and I appreciate staff's stance on this. I agree safety is the primary issue, not just of the surrounding, I guess, the neighbors, the tree, but protection of the resident too. I think he is putting himself or backing himself up into a possibly dangerous situation. However, I have a question. Excuse me, you're the architect. I'm sorry, how do you pronounce your name? Mickelton. Okay. So you said something about wanting to approve the house, the design review of the house, because the process does not run parallel. So the process for the retaining wall is shorter, the plan check process, and the plan check process for the house is longer, 3 times longer. So is it possible to rewrite the condition that construction does not start until the retaining wall permit is issued?
You could do that. It sort of leaves us where we are right now, because we won't know whether there's going to be discretionary review by you on the wall till it gets designed.
Okay, so let me ask it this way. If we approve the house tonight, it starts the building permit process review, which is 3 months. No?
It depends. It depends. It's an iterative process. It's, when there's responses to the building plans, and they have to respond to those, and it can go into overtime.
Okay.
But I think if I understand where you're going with this, it's like, it's a catch-22 to entitle something and then say you can't do it until something that we don't know how it's going to turn out happens. Right. I would advise against that. First, go through the process of finding out how something's going to turn out before you entitle something, because that's putting us in legal jeopardy, because then they've got the entitlements for the house and you're saying, oh, no, there's a thing you have to jump through to get that. Just wait on the entitlements until you've gone through the motions on what it takes to build the foundation for that to occur. That would be our recommendation.
Okay.
Does staff have any sense of the amount of time it would take to come back for a permit on the wall?
And
You mean back to you?
It depends. We have to do, you go ahead.
Yeah, so we have these reports that have made recommendations for how to do the wall, but we don't have a design. So that design has to be created, then it has to be sent to the town engineer, and I think this also should go to the town arborist.
What's the cutoff date, Linda, for this type of work?
The code says that you're not supposed to excavate between October 1st and April 1st, but it's at the discretion of the town engineer. The town engineer can look at how much is being excavated, look at the site, and and if there's no rain, predicted,
Which is very possible.
and it's not that deep of he can waive that. So it's not set in stone.
So then the question would be, how long would it take the applicant to get back to you with some designs?
And I can answer that that's a matter of days. We have this information which verbally describes the design, so it is set, in fact, and we just got a sketch of cross-section of what it is from the geotechnical engineer. So it's sort of there at this point. There are no calculations that would be submitted, but that would be part of the building permit, and very standard. And we're certainly, I don't want it to sound that we're trying to skirt any requirement. We fully agree that the town arborist and the town engineer should vet the solution. It's just a question of whether we wait to bring it back to you for 5 weeks and then start the building submittal process, or whether we start that before.
It's really too bad, because I don't think we have any concerns about your improvements to the house. It's really very straightforward, if only you had submitted the other work at the same time.
But I am understanding, I believe, what staff is saying, which is with regard to basically starting the process on the house and encouraging you to start the process on the house when we've got an unknown before us as to what that's conditioned upon. What I'm hearing and what I believe is that staff has a great deal of experience with this kind of a thing and knows that it can be not a good thing. And so, especially since there's going to be an inherent hurry because of the rainy season coming up. So I guess I'm inclined to go ahead and throw out an opinion right now that I'm inclined to take staff's recommendation and just keep the project as one and continue it to next month, assuming that the applicant can get all the information and the town engineer can meet. And I do think the town arborist should be involved.
Just heads up, it may or may not be ready for you in October, because we have to get the arborist and the civil engineer once the plans are submitted and they're complete to their satisfaction for review. So we may need to go into overtime under the Permit Streamlining Act in order to accommodate a continuation of this piece of the application and completing it with the missing piece, if you will. If not, then we will have to bring it back to you recommending denial if they don't agree to an extension.
And if I could sort of just answer that, or address what you had just said about tying them together, that if it got tied together, and staff's concerned that Mr. Moore expressed about the jeopardy of sort of proceeding with something into construction, and I can understand from the outside and objective point of view how you have no idea whether something will happen or whether it can be afforded or what have you. So I acknowledge that the other path is the very conventional, I think, path of a condition that you typically will put on many different types of approvals. So you can approve with a condition that either if the arborist and the town engineer approve of what we're proposing and that there are no issues, that we're able to proceed without having to come back either in October or November. Or B, the other is that if they do not approve, we come back. So that gives a path for, if we're doing it right and our solution is good, then everybody's covered and staff is able to say, yes, you may proceed, building department can review the plans, and there's no additional delay. And if there's a problem with it, we'll deal with it and we'll come back.
The problem with that situation is that you could actually have to do a lot of work on your plans for the house and the plans for the drainage, and then not be able to pull your permits. And then is that an option for staff to look at?
Do you mean what,
I think what the applicant was suggesting, correct me if I'm wrong, is that we approve the house plans, essentially, and that we would conditionally approve the owners and their geotech and tree guys working with our geotech and tree guys to see if they can agree on a solution that everyone says, yeah, that makes sense, it's not the end of the world, this is doable. Give us a time frame when that could be done. And then if they can do that in time for the October meeting, then we come back for October, but there's so many ifs. And if they can't, then what happens?
Well, that's, as I understand it, and I could understand it wrong, the applicant is requesting that we approve the plans for the house, which I agree look fairly straightforward, although we haven't really discussed them yet. And that would allow the applicant to get started at least on the detailed plan submittal, but that we put a firm condition on that approval that says that either, and I would lean toward, at minimum, I would lean toward the condition that no construction begins at all until the retaining wall is at least designed and approved, if not built. The problem that I think, as I understand it, that staff is pretty unanimously pointing out here is that you get into a situation where we all of us in this room at this moment have some sort of a gut feeling of how big that retaining wall project is going to be, how expensive it's going to be, how long it's going to take to get the approvals. All of those things, we're all kind of dealing with kind of a probabilistic field as to what those things look like. And if it should turn out to be on the larger side of any of our guesses, then we get into a very uncomfortable situation. Uncomfortable for the applicant because you've already sunk money into getting started on the house plans. Even if you haven't actually started to do construction, you've gotten yourself all ready to do construction and you've spent significant amount of money already, and you've probably planned on the construction. There's all sorts of things that are in place that you've been assuming are going to move forward based on an optimistic projection, which turns out not to be the case, and then you're unhappy. And it puts the town in a very difficult situation too, because that's the kind of situation, as I would guess, where the town ends up looking like the bad guy, because somehow it looks like the town led you astray when in fact all we were trying to do was give you an opportunity to take a risk, which you chose to do. And I think staff is saying, let's not take that risk collectively. And incidentally pointing out that this whole thing started many months ago and that risk was avoidable, and that they're looking back on it, there was another path that could have been followed that would have avoided this situation.
Not only that, but what happens, sir, if it turns out that the work is more extensive on your driveway, on your pad, and that you can't get your construction vehicles up to work on the house? That's another possibility. Who knows?
Right, well,
First, I've already spent a ton of money on engineers, and there's very little money I need to spend on getting detailed drawings at this point. So that's not an issue. The second thing is I'm prepared to take the risk. Basically, if it's so expensive I can't afford it, I won't do anything. So I'm totally okay with saying we don't even start construction until there's a permit and approved drawings for the retaining wall. I believe the retaining wall and the house leveling will all be done at the same time. But if you want the retaining wall done first, I think we could specify that. It's more, I'd say my biggest concern is not being able to do anything until April or May of next year. Thank you.
We're already in September. October's upon us. You know, there's some nuances here. For example, if a retaining wall is over 4 feet within 6-foot setback of the front property line, it needs design review. Or, excuse me, it needs a variance. It needs a variance. There's other kickers for design review. So again, this is putting the cart before the horse. It was not what we advised. We're now 9 months into this process from the pre-application. April sounds pretty soon to me in the big scheme of things to do it right.
Well, do we have any more questions of staff or the applicant, or are we ready to make them?
I just have one more comment. I mean, I totally understand and appreciate the sequencing of the permit process and saving time, but from what I've just heard, you wouldn't be able to start the retaining wall anyway unless the town gave you special permission to do so in October, which is what we want to do first anyway. So.
Right. We'd like to do it before the rains
Right,
start
but
if they do.
if it's the rainy season we're trying to avoid or beat, it sounds like you're going to be into next year anyway. And, you know, I really appreciate thinking ahead about the sequencing and how to get this all tied together so that you say go at the same time for both. But I think there are too many unknowns right now that make it very messy. And really, you're asking the town to take a risk on your behalf. And they're trying to be responsible and, you know, kind of address it as one issue because you are going to need that driveway to get up to the house. And so they're doing this in a sense for your own good, you know, to protect you from any risk or jeopardy that might come that is not known.
Right. There are multiple paths that are being discussed that you know could go this way, could go that way, and all of those could be true. But what I see, just sort of going to 20,000 feet, is that there's an opportunity for you to tie this, which is our solution, is an invisible solution because it's behind the existing retaining wall. So in terms of design review, it's what you see now, essentially from the street, with a couple of replaced boards.
I'm sorry, sir, but you're waving hands and telling me how it might look just really doesn't cut it. I think the best option you have, what I would do if I was you, is I would try my hardest to get your design review plans in on the wall and submit a complete application and bring us to it in October. And with any luck, which is not to our benefit, there won't be rains that would preclude you from doing your construction work. That's the chance you have to take given the lateness of your submittal and the best opportunity you have to move it forward this year.
And that would mean you mentioned a few days maybe to get drawings and all your submittal in. I would say you should shoot for that, really get it quickly, because as Linda said, there's then the next step of getting the town engineer and the town arborist to meet and look at it. So that all has to be done before not only our October meeting, but before the date before the October meeting, when staff needs to have the materials in order to create the packets and notice it. So you've got it.
You need to submit them by the 1st
I don't want to
of the
give false hope here. It's very impossible to get all this ready for the October hearing. I don't see how it would happen. The bottom line is, you know, our recommendation is don't put trucks up a substandard driveway with a falling retaining wall October's next month, and we recommend that you, if you have to do discretionary review on the new retaining wall, that you get to do that before you entitle the house, period. And it's October already almost.
I just have a comment. You know, I think a lot of what we're dealing with can be very complicated to people that don't do this for a living. And I would like us to give the applicant the benefit of the doubt that there was a misunderstanding about whether to link or unlink this. I kind of have some problems with an attitude of blaming the applicant for arguably what is a misunderstanding. So I just want to throw that out there. And whatever, Jim, but I really think that, you know, we may not be able to give you guys what you're asking for today, but I think we have to be as respectful as we can to these applicants. Thank you.
That's what we try to do with giving applicants our best opinion.
Okay, so I think we need to make a motion to give direction on how to proceed. So it is going to take, if we want to get more information about the retaining wall, we're requesting that the applicant provide a design and the reports be reviewed then by the town engineer, which would take, and the town arborist, and that's going to take some time.
That's paid for by the applicant.
Right,
In other words,
paid for-
continuing the hearing on the house until an application for the retaining wall is applied for and the application deemed complete and reviewed by the town arborist and engineer, which is a concurrent application at this point that are tied together with this application.
I have a question. Can we review the design of the house and then just continue it? The design?
Yeah, and I think you've kind of almost weighed in on it in a sense, but you can if you wanted to, but
Yeah.
you're going to have another chance to do that anyway if you don't finalize that review.
Right. No, I'm just saying that sometimes feedback is important. If the risk is going to be taken, then that risk is in their court, but at least they have the benefit of our feedback for the design, and then we continue it.
Well, I concur that it occurred to me as well, that if we wanted to just informally ask commissioners whether anybody has any comments or questions about the application, as if we were going to approve it tonight, but we don't, then that would just give the applicant the courtesy of any feedback so that they wouldn't be surprised by it when they do bring it for us. But otherwise, I'm prepared to make the motion essentially as Jim just outlined. Do we want to?
I'd like to review the design or go through the design review of the house, just for the benefit of the feedback.
There's a motion. Is there a motion? No.
I know that our permit titles are sometimes confusing, but this does not require design review. It requires a use permit, right? So right, so the findings that you need to make to approve the project are the use permit findings, not the design review criteria. That would only happen if this was a 50% remodel.
But
Yeah.
It would be helpful to the applicant if you don't have any problems with the
Right.
design of the house to just let them know that.
Yeah, and I don't have any problems. I did have a question, though, about the concrete patio. You're going to build the deck over. Are you removing the concrete, or you're just building on top of that?
No, it's just being built on top of in order to get a level entry or exit from the house onto the deck rather than stepping down a couple of steps.
And is there a patio, does a patio encompass that whole area where the deck is going?
Is there what, sorry?
In other words...
There's concrete in that entire area.
Yeah, that entire area.
Right.
Well, I would just make some recommendations to somehow make that a little bit more permeable. It seems, I don't know, seems like maybe that would help, but that's neither here nor there, just a thought. 'Cause you've got
It
no
is,
permeability.
it is drained.
It is drained?
It is
Okay,
drained in there.
all right, then that's it.
So we'd have access
That's-
to get to that drain from a
Okay.
removable piece of the deck.
Okay, that answers my question, thank you.
Comment on the house, sir, would be the neighbor's issue with the hot tub. If there's some kind of screening that could be provided, or maybe just discussing with your most immediate neighbor the best location for that hot tub, that would be greatly appreciated.
Yeah, we're actually moving it so it would be screened. And it's a 8-foot privacy fence, and it'll basically screen everything except your third floor window. And it would probably have to be about 15 feet high to do that, which was a whole other permitted thing. 8 feet we're okay with.
That's great. And sir, do you have a copy of Ms. Peterson's letter?
I do.
Okay,
I do.
so again, she's incorporated some concerns that I believe we would eventually be asking staff to include into the conditions. So just something else for you to keep in mind when you come back with that.
Yeah, well, yes, that's fine. I think it's already covered, but
I had a question about, I noticed on the plans, you're taking out the masonry the brick fireplace.
Correct.
And you're going to put in a new stove, but it says wood stove. Can you clarify if we allow wood stoves as part of our town code?
You know, I'm going to have to check on that, and I'll do it before, you know, we banned wood-burning stoves, but then there's certain stoves that if you have a filter that gets the particulate matter down to a certain point, that might still be allowed, but we'll check into that and we'll report back at the next meeting. Yeah, it has to be an EPA certified.
It's also something that our building official would be all over at the building permit stage also.
yeah.
Okay.
And I did ask him. I did ask him, and it's a EPA approved whatever, and he said yes. So, but if mind has changed, I'll change mine.
Okay, thank you, because otherwise I'd recommend putting in the gas one. Okay, I think that was a good suggestion, Esther, to ask about any comments on the home. And then, Mimi, do you have anything to add? Okay, so are we ready now to make a motion? Bruce?
I motion to continue. What is this? 145 Forest Avenue, application number 1635, conditional use permit until the next commission, the next hearing, or whenever the applicant is done with their retaining wall design and intelligence.
And I would add that the town arborist as well as the town engineer review those designs before we see them. And I'll second the motion.
Okay, so all in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay, so it looks like we've approved to continue your item pending you submit the requested additional information so that can be reviewed by the town arborist and the town engineer.
See you back soon.
So, Madam Chair, that gets you to the minutes, and I believe that you do have a quorum on the minutes, with the exception of Commissioner Gonzalez-Parber was not here, so she would abstain from approving the minutes, and if you have any corrections to them, we welcome them.
I have a question. Gosh, was it? There was something in one of the staff reports for one of the items tonight that I didn't think was reflected in the minutes. I'm just going to look and see because now I can't remember which one it was. I think it might have been, maybe it was the 19 Broadway. Hold on. Yes. So in the staff report for 19 Broadway, item number 1 in the background said that the commission requested that the applicants investigate and provide bids to the department for both the installation of a commercial kitchen within the existing building and for the addition of a kitchen to the side of the building. And, you know, there's that whole paragraph is not in the minutes. And actually, when I was reading the staff report, I was like, oh, did we? And when I reviewed the minutes, I was like, oh, it sounds like Laura had asked some probative questions about the food truck being only temporary and the actual costs of constructing a kitchen about the same size as Casa Mañana is currently. And so I didn't have time to go back and look at the video or see exactly what we said, but do you guys remember, and if we did specifically ask for this additional information from the applicant, could it be reflected in the minutes?
Well, I think what I was trying to ask the applicant was, had they considered it? So, but I think I saw that you did, that was one of the requested items in your action list. So I thought that it was good that we get the information for the continued hearing, but I don't know if that was really what I was asking. I was kind of thinking, had you looked at it? Because I can understand how it is difficult to put a kitchen in physically into the building, how it's constructed now, considered it's like 2 stories and there's residential uses and offices up above. So I think that was really what I was what was my question.
So is there a correction you'd recommend?
Well, can we go back in time and ask you to do that from that point? I mean, I think your instincts are so right that should have been something we specifically asked them to provide. So maybe we just leave it the way it is.
So the minutes,
They should reflect what happened.
but they reflect what the person doing the minutes thought happened. And there's not even any mention of that, of her comment at all. Right?
Oh, yeah, there is.
Oh, there is?
There's a mention in the beginning of the question Laura was asking the applicant. And so I didn't know whether the minutes just failed to pick up a request from the commission that they...
I'll go back and watch. If I need to change a letter to them and tell them that wasn't really done, I'll do that. I can tell you that I've already heard from them that they're not going to do that. They're not going to bring that bids because there's some kind of mature fruit trees on the side of the building that they don't believe they should have to even consider removing to build something. So they're getting the bids for the interior kitchen, but they're not going to provide, last I talked to them, bids for the addition. Right, and they'll explain why when they come back.
Do you guys want to change the minutes at all, or are they okay?
Go ahead, finish up with that issue.
Well, I think, I don't know, I'm okay with the way it's written in here because I think it expresses if they considered it, that it's stated here in the minutes, and
they can use the fact that staff misinterpreted what happened in their argument for why they didn't provide the bids.
Other than that, I didn't have any issues.
I have 2 small corrections. Page 6, On the last bulleted section, Chair Caroline provided the following comments. Her main issue with the application is the food truck itself, so it says if. That's pretty minor, right? Sorry about that. Page 6. And then page 8, there's a bulleted list in about the middle of the page, and on the last bullet, it says they have, I think the word not should be in there, they have not broken any laws with respect to the noise ordinance. This is what the manager was saying. I think the manager was saying they haven't broken any laws. That's all I have.
Nora, do you have any comments?
No comments. I think the minutes are well represented.
Okay, someone like to make a motion for approval?
I'll move to approve the minutes.
I'll second the motion.
Okay, all in favor? Aye.
Okay. So that gets us to my report. So let me start with a little housekeeping. Last Wednesday at the Town Council, there was a discussion item on the draft ordinance to convert highway commercial to central commercial that you all blessed via resolution on July 21st. And it was a good discussion. It was lengthy. It was late at night. People were tired. They came away with about 10 questions, many of them just clarification, a couple of observations, and some other requests that we are going to be bringing back to you at their request in October. I did make a statement at the end of the hearing that, or of the discussion on it. I said that in my learned opinion, I felt that we as staff could have addressed their questions and made learned comments about it and recommendations for them to make the decisions themselves without having to go back to you all. But with the 4 counselors that were, town council members that were there that night, 3 of them wanted to kick it back to you, so that's going to happen. And then there was concurrence that after that happens, they want to have a joint meeting with you to go through it one last time. That's not my recollection. So a little, you know, and one commissioner said council person knew that they knew the commission was tired with this, but that they were tired for reasons also. So at any rate, it's going to come back to you, and you'll have another chance to answer questions and clarify and consider 1 or 2 points they've requested you to rethink.
Could I,
Sure.
could I piggyback on this, please? I also watched the meeting until like 11 o'clock, and then I couldn't take it anymore. But there were a couple of questions, one being the legal nonconforming status of uses no longer allowed in the town center area. And I'm wondering if when you do come back, you could give us some information on, for instance, a use permit runs with the land, right? And so the problem that some of the council members mentioned was that in a case of a non-conforming use, the use permit runs with the land, but only for a period of 12 months. Say we had S&N Auto. An auto repair no longer allowed use in the central zone. If they sold the business or went out of business for whatever reason, and the property was vacant for 12 months, it could no longer hold its legal non-conforming use. It would need to meet the new code. So my question is, does SNN have a use permit? Do all of our current properties that would become non-conforming uses, do they have use permits? Or can they be given a use permit that runs with the land, or at a minimum, extend the 12-month period to 2 years for those particular non-conforming uses that we would like to keep in the community?
Okay, thank you. I can't answer right now, but we'll take your questions
Right.
under consideration.
I know, you need to take a look at that. And then also, if it's possible, and I offer to assist with this, only if it's, you know, right at the end of September, early October, I think it would be very helpful to have photographs available of what do 4 units per acre look like? What do 10 units per acre look like? What do 25 and 50 units per acre look like? Because I think people have no idea. For instance, one lady said, gee, you're changing this to 4.5 units for the acre. That's terrible. You should at least get it down to 2 units for the acre, or 1 unit for the, but, so obviously, and then I'm thinking, the Wall property is 1 unit for 10 acres. So clearly people don't understand what that means, and it might be helpful if we could have some of that. And I'll try to help you with that, but it would help. And obviously there's still major problems with the map, so let's take a look at that.
Thank you.
To add to that. Okay. I've got a faulty one. Okay. So I think that's a great idea to have some kind of visual aid, because aren't we going from 25 to 4, or we're reducing it, or I don't know what the count is now.
There is no maximum density in the CC or CH right now.
Oh, I thought there was. Okay.
It could be anything.
But it could be anything, so it might be a good idea to show them what, you know, I'm thinking about the apartments on off of Broadway, you know, the ones that are between Sir Francis Drake. I don't know how many units are there, but if, you know, that could be an example of what 12 units are and what 4 units could look like, just because I think it is hard for people to visualize in their mind the mass that we're talking about.
I just want to make sure I understood what you said on the previous item, Norma. So you want to know if there's a way to grant legal non-conforming uses a longer amount of time that they could be shut down before they lose their legal non-conforming status. You wanted to increase it to 2 years. That's what you said, right? Yes. Okay. I just want to make sure I understood.
To have them run with the land.
Right, and that, because at this point, my understanding is legally, uses do run with the land unless a business that has that use permit voluntarily vacates for more than 12 months. I think that's California law, but we'll find out.
Okay. It may well be, but maybe we could tweak our ordinance. That seemed to be some of the council members' main concerns.
If I recall, that's actually one of the ways that the Chevron station could not be resurrected.
Yes.
Carte blanche.
That's right.
Yeah. So, are we done with that report in terms of what's coming back to you on the CH to CC? So,
I think so.
that gets me to an announcement I have to make. I resigned this morning from the town effective on my birthday, which is December 2nd, 11 weeks from tomorrow. And since I will be in India the last 2 weeks, including of Thanksgiving week and the week after Thanksgiving, which that Friday is December 2nd, my 65th birthday. I actually have 9 weeks still in town. I'll be on the payroll till December 2nd, but I actually will only be here 9 weeks physically, and the end. No, yeah. And so basically after tonight, there are 2 more planning commissions meetings that I will be a part of, and your meeting in November on November 17th will be my actually last physical time in the position here, even though I'll be on the books until December 2nd. So I just wanted to say that it's been, you know, an incredible run, 7 years, 5 months, 2 weeks, and 1 day, but who's counting? And actually, I got out of here just in time, because if I had made it till January 1st, Linda has informed me with her sort of informal review that I would have had the record for the longest serving planning director in Fairfax's history, and I'm not sure I want that mantle. But we have accomplished a lot. Bruce and I go back to the first day I got here when you were on the chair of the General Plan Advisory Committee, and walking into the whole kerfuffle on trying to get a complete general plan done. And I arrived March 31st, 2009. And by golly, by April 2012, we got the first complete general plan, and Mimi was part of the super committee retreat along with Bruce. You both have your fingerprints on the knife. You're incriminated here. The first complete general plan with all the elements, and one extra, the town center element, which is coming back to haunt us soon. All passed in April, and of course we knew we weren't going to be compliant with the housing elements, so we got to work. That was April 12 when the general plan was passed, so we got to work and we redid the housing element, and that was passed, went through you up to council, and was adopted in October 2013 and certified by the state. And then of course we were still behind, so we had to get working ahead again to get caught up with the next cycle, the 5th RENA cycle. And we had a bump in the road in 2014 with trying to implement the zoning changes with the petition that was circulated in town. And of course that set things back for a number of political reasons. And then we finally did adopt the most recently updated housing element in 2015, in May of 2015. And by the way, after that bump in the road, after the petition that called for the repeal of the ordinance changes in 2014. Thanks to Mr. Garrett's insistence, we sort of restarted, and we had these 3 town forums that we are, you know, laboriously tried to disseminate the information on what the general plan's about, what the housing element was about. And I might add that starting with that petition drive in 2014, which I will be candid with you, I think was propagated on misinformation, and deliberately so. And people started to wake up after our 3 forums that, wait a minute, that's not what I signed, you know, I didn't sign this for that reason. We had the same sort of misinformation campaign with adopting the housing element last year. As recently as the first workshop for the town center plan on June 14th, I was confronted with a half-full room of unhappy people, because the same misinformation campaign was at work, primarily orchestrated by the same individual who I humorously refer to as the Pied Piper of the Green Party of the Ross Valley. And I just want to say something for the record. I think it's most unfortunate that this goes on in this town of all places, because it's indicative of what's happening across the country with this campaign of division. And I have labored endlessly with you and with all the people that sat up there and with this staff to do things in a public participatory process, in a bottom-up fashion, which that document represents. And the primary perpetrator of this misinformation and his minion who carry his water continue to try to divide this town and create a situation of them and us, when we've been continually working to try to make it inclusive. And we had someone, a poor person last week, promoted by the same individual, that stood up and said, why are you rushing this through? I haven't known anything about this. My goodness, through 12 hours of a general plan advisory committee before I even got here. So I just want to say it's very unfortunate, and I now have a voice since I've resigned, where I'm not incriminating my boss in a negative way, and I'm a planning director, and I have an obligation that's different than a town manager. I am supposed to recommend good policy. I'm supposed to advocate what's best for the town, not just follow town council policy. And that's what I'm doing right now by speaking up to you tonight. I think this campaign of misinformation is divisive. It's indicative of what's wrong in this country right now. And the individuals that stand back to the 11th hour and point arrows, whether it's the Memorial Park or Lefty Gomez detention basin, it's not fair. It costs the public a lot of money. It costs us a lot of staff time and aggravation. And with that, I'll wait until the next meeting to talk more about it. But I want to end on a positive note, at least tonight in my report, and that is working with these people and our small staff at City Hall has been truly wonderful. This is a dedicated group of people. Having Michelle Gardner as your town clerk and Garrett Toy as the town manager, particularly after the buffoonery that went on for 3.5 years when I first got here, and the misappropriation in town funds. And I would verify that by saying our previous town finance director just got convicted last week in Colorado of forgery in the Waldorf schools handling of money, okay? And that was allowed. She was allowed to walk out of here without calling her on the carpet for misappropriation of town funds. So you got a great staff. I tell you, I've gotten goosebumps for 7.5 years during every town council meeting and during every planning commission meeting, because this is democracy in action. And of all places, for there to be a spirit of cooperation and coming together, like I said earlier about the deliberation on the Airbnb, it's really what makes this country tick. I'm going to stop soon, but you know, this country was founded on freedom, democracy, and tolerance. And it's not about them and us. We're not the bad guys on staff. We don't make the rules. You do, and the town council do. We're always the bad guys at the front counter telling people what the rules are, and boy, it's not fun. My job comes with a target on its back, and the normal lifespan of a town manager or a planning director is about 5 years. So I made it 7.5. I'm going to get out of here before I got the record, but I just want to tell you what an honor it is to serve with these people. You're in good shape also, and Linda's in much better shape having Michelle here. But I am just so honored to have been staff for you all. And, you know, there's a good document in place. It's a living document, the general plan. It can be revised 4 times a year, has been said over and over again. And go ahead, revise it. It's your town. I'm hopeful that the next town center workshop on October 1st, where we brought in 2 facilitators and an urban design expertise, so I'm out of harm's way and I'm not accused of it being my plan. I hope it is a new, fresh start, as the mayor likes to say. And I hope people will come to that, not thinking there's some ulterior plan that's already been decided, but realizing the town center element calls for the town coming together and see if they can improve the town center. And that's what this exercise is about. There ain't no done deal. There ain't no back room done deals. So with that, 2 more meetings and I'm out of here. And it's been a pleasure. Thank you. Now it's your turn.
Well, I don't know if we can, how do we beat that? But anyway, does anyone have any comments or requests?
And I want to thank you. I want to thank those of you that have been going out and trying to deal with the misinformation campaign. I know there's a big effort here, and I know Bruce just got initiated on Nextdoor, where there's on some tragic, not good things being said about, you know, they're downright racist, frankly, from what I've been told.
Yeah, I spent a day and a half reading, I believe it's 336 comments on Nextdoor in order to just try to get up to speed on what the concerns were. And there are a lot of thoughts I would have about that, which I won't go into in detail here, but I will say that it has become somewhat less strident with time. I was contacted by one of the people who had learned about it recently and who was an old friend of mine and we respect each other. And so she contacted me and I emailed her just my take on an explanation of what was being considered, including the fact that nothing was a done deal. And she appreciated that and posted it on Nextdoor. So I haven't actually posted anything on Nextdoor. I'm not clear on whether I even should as a person working with the town. But that was posted on Nextdoor, that email, there were a number of positive comments about it on Nextdoor. And she said she got a number of positive comments directly to her. So, and since then it's been much tamer. Of course, the conversation wanders all to various other areas that are vaguely linked correctly or incorrectly. And it just kind of, it's this sort of sea of fear and divisiveness. And that is, it's unnecessary because, as you said, Jim, my experience in coming to Fairfax, 25 years ago or something, and getting involved in this town on a volunteer basis and spending an enormous number of my evenings and Saturdays working on town documents and projects, which are, they take time to go through, and trying to do a good thing for this town. My experience has been that this has been the best local democracy that I've seen. This is as good as it gets. It's not easy to have a democracy, but I absolutely concur that there's a sort of a personality cult in this town that keeps being negative and keeps coming back to some sort of fear that the word they is, you could count how many times they is being used on Nextdoor. They are doing something to us. I guess we are the they, but we are actually also, we are the us. And every meeting that I've attended has been opened, and we've put up with the Brown Act regulations to not talk with each other outside of the meetings. Every single deliberation has been in front of the public if they cared to come. I go back to my comment earlier tonight as we were talking about our discussion item tonight, and we had nobody here to comment on it, and I just wonder whether we're going to get called the bad guys at some time later on for the fact that we had what was, I thought, a really excellent, respectful discussion among ourselves and came up with some recommendations. It's just the beginning of this, but this is how it's done. This is how it's done, and it's done pretty well. The reason that there is a Brown Act is because there are times when the way this is done is that some people who have economic interests get into a back room and they plan what's going to happen, and that's how a place like Florida gets created. This is not that. This is what we're actually looking for, and I think we're at a little bit of a crisis point right now. We're losing a planning commissioner right now already who has been one of them plan and on many other things. She's very respected and just a really helpful person to have on the planning commission, and she is just done with it. She's just exhausted from exactly this issue. You go and you do your level best and you give your heart and soul to trying to do the right thing, and then you just get shattered for it. And it just really sucks. So I don't know if anybody's still listening at this point in the meeting, but I'll go on record to say that this is not the way it's supposed to be. And there's a lot of improvement in this town. When I first came here, there were 2 council members who literally, well, I won't even get into all the things that happened up here on this Diaz on the town council. I used to see the bumper sticker that says only in Fairfax, and I thought it was a joke because, that was an unbelievable time. They both got voted out of office, and over time, things have improved, but we still get clobbered every once in a while, and we're right in the middle of one of those clobberings right now, and it is so unnecessary, so absolutely unnecessary, and such an absolute missed opportunity to miss the chance to be actually creative as a town, which is what we are capable of doing. This is a very creative town, and we ought to be creative together when we do our planning. So anyway, as far as Jim, I just want to thank you personally for, it's almost like a, I don't know whether it's a second career or a fifth career, but it's one of my careers to have learned about planning. And from you and Larry, Larry was one of the many great things he did for this town was to bring you here, as I understand it, recommend you for this job. The two of you have just been teachers for me. I feel like I had an incredible opportunity to learn from you. So thank you so much.
Yes.
It will not be.
Okay, anyone else, or?
Just a comment to our one resident who's still here. I don't know if you are all aware that Sue Peterson was on our planning commission for many, many years. We worked together many years back, and this may be there's an opportunity. We have a vacancy, and you're an experienced commissioner. This might be your chance to get back on the commission, Sue. Give that some thought.
It's a good commission.
It's a great group. That's right, we were saying we had the same discussion 20 years ago that we're having tonight. So we could continue that. We could finish that discussion finally. Give that some thought, Sue.
Mimi, do you have anything, or?
She's beside herself.
Well, I still want to actually do a presentation to the Planning Commission about the Open Space Committee. So, I don't know if you guys want to talk to me about that before one of the upcoming planning meetings, and we can talk about
Yeah,
doing that.
I'm sorry that we didn't contact you ahead of time. There was a decision to pull my report to you about the outcome of the discussion with the Manor Road home that you approved on the 50 acres that was taken to the committee in July, I believe, because Garrett wanted to have a chance for Mr. Jack Junkins on the committee to discuss this with our town attorney, and also for Garrett to have a chance to meet with the committee ahead of bringing that report to you. And there's sort of a tangent between your report and that whole disposition. You wanted them on the same meeting. I'm sorry that that fell through the cracks.
Well, I would actually like some advance notice either way. I mean, I wasn't even aware that you guys were considering doing it at this meeting. So, if you start to plan something where you want me to do a presentation, you have to tell me ahead of time.
Absolutely, and we also follow orders from the town manager, so we sometimes get a change of direction and yeah.
I thought Garrett was shooting for November because
Yeah.
he's going to be done meeting with.
Yeah, I think we'll get back to you and confirm whether it's going to be November or not, as soon as we know. Yeah.
I'll make sure I get back to you, Mimi.
Yeah. For example, I thought we were going to be doing it last month, and then it got discontinued on the packet day. Okay.
We have no control.
Okay, anything else? All right, so
Let's
do I have
adjourn.
you have a motion to adjourn?
Let's adjourn.
Okay.